Scientists found a new statue on Easter Island, inside the crater of an old volcano. They were sure they already cataloged all the moai. That's what they call those famous stone giants. But this discovery changes what we know about them. First of all, the moai were rarely alone, so we may hear about more of them in the same area. Second, it's the first moai found at the bottom of a lake. Scientists were working on a project to restore the marshland in the volcano's crater when they stumbled upon the statue. The lake that was here began to dry up in 2018. For at least 200 or 300 years, it was almost 10 feet deep, so it would be impossible for humans to build or put a statue on the bottom. Scientists think the moai are over 500 years old. It's possible that the Rapa Nui people who built them probably brought the statue here when the lake was dry in the past. The new find turned out to be slightly over 5 feet tall, which is smaller than the other statues on the island. It's a full-bodied one with recognizable features. Researchers also plan to do radiocarbon dating to find out the exact age of the statue. They don't plan to remove it from where it was found because the oldest members of the Rapa Nui community want it to stay where it is. Moai statues kept scientists puzzled for centuries. They knew that they were built as a dedication to the island's chiefs, but no one could figure out why they chose these various locations for the statues. Most of them were found along the coast of the island. Researchers from Binghamton University in New York decided to study the locations more closely and learned that it had to do with water. Easter Island has porous volcanic soil that absorbs rain easily, so there aren't enough streams or rivers and too little fresh water. Hundreds of years ago, the island's people relied on groundwater discharge to get drinking water. The water stored deep underground in rock or soil layers, called aquifers, reach a point where it flows up to the surface. When this underground water emerges near the coast, it mixes with the salty seawater, but the salt level remains low enough that the water is safe to drink. The islanders used to collect this water directly from the spots where it flowed out. And it looks like that's why they built the moai along the coast, right near their most important water source. The main bodies of most of the statues were made of volcanic tuff from a local quarry in what used to be a volcano. This material is easy to carve, but not so easy to transport. That's probably why researchers found over 300 unfinished moai back in the quarry. The rest of them stand in various locations, facing the villages. It looks like the statues were carved lying on their backs. Then, their sculptors detached them from the rock, moved them downslope, and set them in a vertical position to finish the work. When it was done, it was time to move the statue to its platform. And we're talking about moving statues that weighed around half as much as a single-story, unfurnished house without a car or any modern equipment for 3 miles. The locals must have invented some original transportation method. Scientists tried to recreate it and pulled moai replicas on wooden sleds. They thought someone would have used palm trees for that purpose, but this theory has been debunked. The most successful experiment so far was wielding ropes to rock the statue down the road in a standing position. This sounds legit, because the local Rapa Nui legends mention that the moai walked from the quarry. And of course, they needed a good road to get there. In the early 20th century, researchers Catherine Rutledge found an 800-year-old road network on the island. It was a bunch of pathways around 15 feet wide going from the quarry. She thought that those roads were ceremonial and not built just for the statues. She wasn't a famous scientist back then, so others mostly ignored the theory. Several decades later, famous Norwegian adventurer and archaeologist Thor Heyerdahl published his theory. He mentioned that the roads were there exclusively to transport the moai, and some of the statues were dropped along the way for some reason. But in 2010, researchers found that the statues reached their final destinations because they were all set on hidden platforms. The road floor was U-shaped, so pulling massive statues along them wouldn't be easy. You can still find roughly 15 miles of these roads on the island and see them from satellite images. Scientists used to believe that the Rapa Nui people made Easter Island unlivable and ruined their own civilization. But a new study that used remote sensing data and machine learning says that the island's population didn't grow too big and collapse. Instead, the islanders figured out how to live in this challenging place and kept their population small and steady for hundreds of years. Researchers found amazing rock gardens as proof for this new theory. Easter Island, or Rapa Nui, is one of the most remote places on Earth where people live. It's surrounded by the Pacific Ocean. Central Chile is 2,200 miles to the east of it, and French Polynesia is 2,600 miles to the west. The island, which is 63 square miles in size, is made entirely of volcanic rock. But the volcano stopped erupting a long time ago, so Rapa Nui's soil has lost most of the useful nutrients that lava once brought here. It's also drier than tropical islands, and its deep waters made fishing much harder for the settlers, as there's no shallow lagoons or reefs to fish in. So, the islanders came up with a smart farming method called rock gardening to survive here. They spread rocks of different sizes over the soil and planted crops like sweet potatoes and taro between the rocks. The rocks protected the plants from harsh winds and salty air and helped regulate the soil's temperature. They also slowly released minerals into the soil, so it became healthier for growing food. Some islanders still use these gardens, although they don't produce a lot of food. People in places like New Zealand, the Canary Islands, and the US Southwest have used similar techniques to grow crops in uneasy environments. While scientists are solving Easter Island mysteries, the island itself is teaching them something new about how the Earth's mantle works. For years, they thought it moved like a slow conveyor belt, carrying tectonic plates along with it. But a new study by geologists from Cuba, Colombia, and the Netherlands is challenging this idea. They used a special method called zircon dating to figure out the island's age. Zircons are tiny crystals that form when magma cools, and they have traces of uranium inside that turns into lead over time. So, the scientists measured this change to tell the age of zircons, and they were shocked when they saw that some zircons were way older than expected, around 165 million years old. The island itself is only 2.5 million years old. The scientists found that these ancient zircons came from deep inside the mantle, under the tectonic plate, by magma from earlier volcanic activity. Easter Island's volcanoes are part of a group called hotspot volcanoes, formed by hot plumes of rock rising from deep within the Earth. Normally, these plumes stay in one spot while the Earth's crust moves above them and creates a chain of islands, like Hawaii. But the discovery of ancient zircons on a younger island shows there's more going on deep underground than we thought. Research showed that 165 million years ago, a giant volcanic plateau existed where Easter Island is now. But 110 million years ago, it sank under Antarctica because of tectonic subduction. Ancient zircon minerals stayed put and didn't travel away with the mantle conveyor belt. So, it looks like the mantle near hotspot plumes doesn't flow as much as scientists used to think. It stays still. This new idea could lead to big changes in how we understand plate tectonics and how the Earth's inside moves over time. The Easter Island giant heads are so popular that they even have their own emoji. Their true meaning has been a mystery for hundreds of years. But it looks like we at least know how they were built and transported to their permanent location. The moai statues consist of 3 parts: a large yellow body, a red hat or top knot, and white inset eyes with a coral iris. Around 1,000 of them were created. The main bodies of most of the statues were made out of volcanic tuff from a local quarry in what used to be a volcano. The material is easy to carve, but not so easy to transport. That's probably why researchers found over 300 unfinished moai back in the quarry. The rest of them stand in various locations, facing the villages as if watching over the locals. So, it looks like the statues were carved lying on their backs. Then, their creators detached them from the rock, moved them down slope, and set them in a vertical position to finish the work. Once it was done, it was time to get the statue to its platform. Now, if you've ever moved houses, you know how physically hard it is. So, imagine having to move a statue that is about half as heavy as a house without a car or any modern equipment for a distance of 3 miles. The locals must have invented some original way of doing it, and scientists tried to recreate it to guess what it was. They tried pulling moai replicas on wooden sleds. They thought someone could have used palm trees for that purpose, but this theory has been debunked. The most successful experiment so far was wielding ropes to rock the statue down the road in a standing position. This method sounds real because the local Rapa Nui legends mention that the moai walked from the quarry. And, of course, they needed a good road to get there. In the early 20th century, researcher Catherine Rutledge identified an 800-year-old road network on the island. It was a bunch of pathways around 15 feet wide going from the quarry. She thought that those roads were ceremonial and not built just for the statues. She wasn't a famous scientist back then, so others mostly ignored the theory. Several decades later, famous Norwegian adventurer and archaeologist Thor Heyerdahl published his theory. He mentioned that the roads were built exclusively to transport the moai, and some of the statues were dropped along the roads for some reason. But in 2010, researchers found that the statues weren't randomly dropped. They actually reached their final destinations, as they were all set on hidden platforms. Plus, the road floor was U-shaped, so pulling massive statues along them wouldn't be easy. You can still find roughly 15.5 miles of these roads on the island and see them from satellite images. And it looks like Catherine Rutledge was right about them. The roads were probably built for pilgrims to a sacred volcano, and the moai standing by them were sort of signposts. Halfway across the world in southern England lies another mystery made of stone, a massive sound illusion, a symbol of unity, a burial ground, or more. Scientists are still debating the purpose of Stonehenge. It took Neolithic builders around 1,500 years to construct this beauty made of roughly 100 stones standing upright in a circle. Millions of tourists come to see it every year, and heritage protectors were worried about the modern road snaking close to the landmark. That modern road is now sunk into the ground below the grass level. And even though archaeologists assumed they could find an older road under it, they didn't have any high hopes. But when they took off a layer of asphalt, they noticed 2 parallel ditches that were nearly perpendicular to the road. The ditches connected the shortened sections of the avenue. That's what the archaeologists call the ancient pathway leading up to Stonehenge. It proves that the ancient people used to visit the monument for their purposes, and probably some ceremonies. Another interesting find during a dry summer was 3 dry patch marks within the stone circle. It looks like they were left there by 3 massive boulders. So Stonehenge could have been a full circle once. In 2021, archaeologists found a Roman road submerged in the Venetian lagoon. The fact that it runs there on the bottom for nearly 4,000 feet is proof that the Romans were here before sea levels rose and flooded the area. It supports the theory that there was an important settlement here centuries before Venice was founded at the spot in the 5th century CE. The ancient Romans were great at many things, and one of them was building roads. And it looks like they weren't afraid to work on the trickiest terrain. Scans have shown that the ancient road was built right on the beach, and it requires some serious skills. Imagine a village from over 1,000 years ago frozen in time. There's still half-eaten food on the tables and personal things left in a rush. It's all preserved so well because it's covered by volcanic ash. researchers found this village in 2011 in modern-day El Salvador. They believe there was a mass celebration in a Maya village called Sunken over 1,400 years ago. The whole village was there, preparing the main temple for a ritual when a nearby volcano erupted. The 200-plus residents had no time to rush back to their homes. To save their lives, they had to flee the plaza and run south on a raised road called Sakbe. They managed to escape from the plumes of volcanic ash. In addition to being a superhero and saving all the people, the road had another cool feature. All Sakbe roads had an outer layer of stones, but this one was made of ash. Ironic, isn't it? It proves that the Maya people didn't only use stones to build their roads. Archaeologists discovered several coins in Jerusalem when they were excavating an old street. When they saw the minting dates, they realized the road was built when Pontius Pilate was the Roman governor of Judea. Since he was the local ruler, it's almost clear that he gave the order to build the road. The pilgrims most likely used this road to reach the Temple Mount for worship. The pathway, which was laid with over 10,000 tons of limestone, was almost as broad as a London bus is long. It had been there for 2,000 years. It's not common that you find such a luxurious road, and it's not clear why a Roman governor would spend so much money on the road. It was probably his attempt to make the city's population like him. Plus, it was a great way to show he had both money and influence. The Old North Trail is an ancient highway that the inhabitants of North America used for 10,000 years, first on foot, then with dogs, and finally with horses. The first travelers moved around the continent down its paths for thousands of miles long before the first Europeans arrived, and even during the last ice age. They used it to carry trade goods, visit relatives, find a mate, or just explore. Researchers keep finding evidence that the stories and legends of the Blackfoot Indians about this trail are real. And it could be even the road that served one of the most massive human migrations. The people who crossed from Asia on the Bering Land Bridge about 15,000 years ago and settled in North America might have used the ice-free corridor along the Rockies, which later became a part of the trail. The Nakasendo Highway was built in the 17th century during the Edo period of Japanese history to link Kyoto and Tokyo. The 310-mile-long road runs across mountain ranges and down onto the plain. It was one of the 5 main roads used by the feudal lords and their families to travel to the capital. There were 69 post stations on the route where travelers could stay overnight. The road was built for horses and pedestrians, as the Japanese didn't use carts. You can still walk parts of the route.
The moai statues have been standing tall and proud for hundreds of years. Once people put an enormous effort into carving these grand sculptures, and then they just suddenly stopped making them. But why? Let's figure out this mystery. Easter Island, located 2,500 miles east of Tahiti, has an area of 63 square miles. To this day, it's one of the most isolated islands in the world. Once it was covered with forests, filled with different trees and ferns. But when the first humans came to the island around 400 CE, the forest slowly began to disappear. And starting from 1250 CE, moai statues began appearing all over the place. People made them from different types of rock: compressed volcanic ash, basalt, trachyte, and red scoria. As it's a volcanic island, these were all the ingredients the creators of the statues had to use. And once the builders completed their work, they covered the statues with pumice. The faces of the statues are different, but they all have distinct expressions with heavy brows and large noses. Their arms are carved into the body. Some have hats on top of their heads. There are nearly 900 statues all over the island. They differ in size. The average height is 13 feet tall. and the largest ones reach 33 feet in height and weigh up to 82 tons. Because the statues have so many different faces, there are theories that they represent and honor ancestors, chiefs, and other important people who lived on the island. But without any clear evidence, it's almost impossible to figure out the true purpose of the moai. Once they stood beautifully along the coast, watching over people in settlements, and their backs faced toward the spirit world of the sea. When Europeans first discovered the moai statues in the 1700s, many of them had already toppled over, and the construction of statues had stopped way earlier than that. Huge amounts of effort were put into making these things. Expert craftspeople spent a great deal of time slowly carving the statues with basic picks. A team of up to 6 people would work hard for an entire year to make just one statue. Then they often had to transport it to its special place on the island, as far as 11 miles. With the help of carbon dating, experts have managed to figure out that the statues started to appear in 1250 CE. And then, suddenly, in 1500 CE or so, the process just stopped. The creators of the statue just left their stone chisels where they were last used, and only a quarter of all the statues were actually placed where they were supposed to be. Half of them still remained in the quarry, while others were left on the ground mid-transit. Something happened on the island, and it caused everyone to just lose interest in the statues. There are many theories around why it could happen, and they mostly relate to deforestation. Islanders may have used wood to move the statues across the island. They possibly did this with the help of sleds and ropes, or even used logs to roll the statues or canoes to float them. The wood started to deplete eventually. Trees on the island took very long to grow, and rats ate most seeds. People had many uses for wood, and they needed it not only for practical things, but also to create other statues. Another reason why the inhabitants of the island could have stopped building the statues might be that they were busy with other projects. Specialized rock gardens were becoming more common with a growing population. They were great for the soil, keeping it warm and fertilizing it at the same time. Islanders spent much time and effort making these rock gardens, and there simply wasn't enough time to focus on building and moving the statues. Another theory suggests that what people believed in changed over time. Supposedly, the islands once saw the statues as a connection to their ancestors. After some time, though, rituals depicting a show of strength and endurance became more widespread. And with these rituals, islanders started to carve images related to seabirds. Seabirds became the main animal on the island. People started to believe that their ancestors looked over them through birds instead of the statues, so there was no longer a reason to build the moai. Anyway, these theories might be true, but the main problem was that the small island couldn't support a growing population. What was once a lush land covered in forests quickly became a barren landscape. For the first few centuries, people relied on forest resources, but agriculture became more important sometime after 1550, when forests disappeared. Tribes that once worked together to build the fantastic monoliths focused on competing against one another instead. During this struggle for land and resources, the moai statues were toppled over because people wanted to reduce their significance. Over the following centuries, all the statues were pushed over, but not all of them deliberately. Many fell naturally after being neglected for so long. Some even ended up in the ocean water surrounding the island, and there they sat for a while. But there was some good news for these statues. They were re-erected, providing a great experience for visitors from all over the world. If you make a journey all the way to this isolated island, the first question you'll probably ask will not be how the statues were made or how they were moved. It will be, how on earth did anyone even make it here in the first place? It was one of the most amazing feats ever. The Polynesians sure did some pretty extraordinary things. From as early as 1500 BCE, these boat-faring people began to explore their world. They used the most advanced marine inventions of their time. They sailed across the ocean in catamarans and outrigger boats, starting in Southeast Asia and inhabiting many more places throughout the Pacific. They lived as far north as Hawaii in 900 BCE, and all the way to the south in New Zealand by 1200 BCE. And the farthest journey to the east was, of course, Easter Island. In only a few hundred years, these early sailors inhabited an area of thousands of square miles. They simply memorized where they had already been and, this way, managed to navigate the ocean. They used a wide range of techniques. They watched the sun as it rose and set during the day. Stars helped them at night. If it was overcast and sailors couldn't figure out direction visually, they used other brilliant methods. They watched the movements of ocean currents and wave patterns and paid attention to bioluminescence in the water. These patterns helped them find where specific islands were located. These seafarers even understood how islands and atolls in the distance caused air and sea interference patterns. Birds provided them with certain signs too. Some of them migrated long distances from one island to another, which gave travelers some kind of a visual connection for their route. Other types of birds had specific feeding times. Sailors knew when and where they hunted and directed their boats depending on where these birds fed. Vikings certainly get way too much credit for their seafaring abilities. Where they used a sun compass, the early Polynesians relied purely on the knowledge of how nature itself could guide them. Their skills were so advanced that in 1769, Captain James Cook, an English explorer, even hired a Polynesian navigator because of his extensive knowledge of the seas. But even more surprising was the fact that he drew a map from memory. It covered an area that was 2,000 miles wide. In this region, there were 130 islands, and the navigator knew 74 of those islands by name. At the beginning of their voyage, Captain Cook often disregarded the navigator's advice. But toward the end of their journey, he was very impressed. He also recognized the Polynesians as possibly the most widespread nation on Earth.
About 14,000 years ago, some super-skilled builders from another planet landed on Earth. Their mission was to help build a massive stone complex with perfectly interlocking blocks. They used some advanced technology, centuries ahead of their time, and once the job was done, they disappeared without a trace. This is not a sci-fi plot, but one of the theories trying to explain the mystery of Puma Punku. Scientists don't officially accept it, but they still don't know for sure how, when, and who built this impressive construction. Puma Punku is part of the ancient city of Tiwanaku, near Lake Titicaca in Bolivia. Tiwanaku is an important place in Inca traditions. They believed it to be the place where the world was created. Historians believe Puma Punku was built around 536 AD. The first Europeans discovered it in the middle of the 16th century. At the heart of Puma Punku, there is a huge, terraced platform filled with massive stone blocks, some as big as a school bus. The largest one weighs a jaw-dropping 131 tons. That's heavier than 20 elephants. Even the smaller rocks are as big as a couch. Archaeologists believe there were at least 5 big gateways, as well as several smaller ones that may have been part of a grand monument. The site is built using 2 types of stone, red sandstone and andesite, which is one of the hardest rocks on Earth. The 8-shaped blocks of the construction fit together like puzzle pieces. They all look the same, as if they were mass-produced in a factory. But that should have been impossible for an ancient civilization. Even the smaller rocks are as big as a couch. These blocks were carved with precise holes and grooves to fit together. Builders made perfectly straight lines, cut identical angles, created smooth surfaces, and drilled holes. Some scientists believe they may have used advanced techniques, but there's no record of the tools they used. It took another 1,000 years before other civilizations could match this level of precision. One of the biggest mysteries is how these enormous stones were transported. Puma Punku sits high up in the mountains at 12,600 feet above sea level. So high that even trees don't grow there. The builders didn't have wheels, cranes, or modern machines. Yet somehow, they moved these heavy blocks miles from their original locations. Some scientists think they used llama skin ropes and ramps, but no one really knows for sure. The most commonly accepted version is that the Tiwanaku civilization, which thrived in the region between 500 and 1000 CE, built this impressive site. The complex was enormous and had many different areas. A western court, a large open area in the center, and an eastern court that was surrounded by walls. Long ago, it must have been incredibly beautiful, with polished metal plaques shimmering in the sunlight, brightly colored fabrics and ceramics decorating the buildings, and people in elaborate costumes walking through the plaza. But something doesn't add up here, as the Tiwanaku people never wrote down how they built Puma Punku. They would have probably left some clues if they had accomplished something like this. Plus, the Tiwanaku people didn't have the high-tech equipment needed to carve and move giant stone blocks with perfect precision. The architectural historians who first studied the place professionally concluded that a hammerstone couldn't have done such a fine job. They found no metal tools that were used in the construction process. That's why they suggested they might have used some unconventional tools the historians didn't even recognize as tools. There's a theory that these ancient builders might have had a way to soften stone to make it easy to carve before it hardened again. Or maybe they poured liquid stone into molds, just like we make concrete today. If it's true, this would mean an advanced civilization existed in South America long before we thought. Some researchers even think it had to do with the theory of Atlantis, or other lost civilizations that may have had immense knowledge before a global catastrophe wiped them out. Local legends say that powerful deities used incredible powers to lift and shape the massive stone blocks. And some people believe Puma Punku was so advanced that the builders must have had help from visitors from outer space. The perfect cuts and massive stones look like something from modern construction. The supporters of this theory also say that some carvings at Tiwanaku show figures wearing helmet-like shapes, so they could be left by space travelers. Scientists from the University of California, Los Angeles, decided to officially debunk this theory. They created a digital model of Puma Punku using super precise measurements from historical records. Then, they used a 3D printer to make a miniature version of the site at 4% of its original size. Once the pieces were printed, the team sorted them by size, shape, and design, like a giant puzzle. They noticed that some blocks had special grooves for holding metal clamps, and others had ornamental carvings. When they finished their model, they realized one of the buildings had a very familiar design. It looked just like structures from two nearby sites. This was solid proof that Puma Punku was built by humans, not visitors from outer space. Over the centuries, people stole stones from Puma Punku and moved them around. This made things even more confusing for archaeologists. UCLA team created a digital archive, so researchers all over the world can now study the site without traveling to Bolivia. So maybe we'll hear about the new twists in this mystery soon. Another construction from the past that still impresses us with extreme precision is the Serapeum of Saqqara, a burial place built around 3,000 to 3,500 years ago. A French scientist accidentally discovered it in 1850. Inside the Serapeum, he found a long underground hallway. On both sides of the hallway, there were giant stone rooms, and inside those rooms, there were huge granite sarcophagi. These sarcophagi were not built for people, but for the sacred Apis bulls. These bulls were treated like royalty, as the people believed they were chosen by deities. The Egyptians believed these bulls were the incarnations of the deity Ptah and had magical powers to protect their kingdom. Some of the stone boxes inside the Serapeum weighed around 70 tons. They were made with perfectly straight angles and smooth surfaces. Scientists noted roller marks on the floor and found wooden winches with levers, which the Egyptians likely used to move the sarcophagi. Since the burial chambers were lower than the hallway floor, workers filled them with sand, rolled the sarcophagus into place, and then slowly removed the sand to lower it perfectly into position. A stone inscription found in the Serapeum said it took 28 days just to move one of these stone boxes. Even though these sarcophagi were meant for bulls, they were way bigger than needed. Pharaohs, who were the rulers of Egypt, were buried in tiny coffins. So it's really weird that these boxes were so enormous. Another question is why they used granite, which is so hard to carve, instead of limestone. Some people believe the stone boxes weren't just tombs. They might have been ancient energy generators. The Egyptians knew about fermentation. If someone placed food or meat inside a perfectly sealed granite box and let fermentation happen, pressure would build up inside. Granite contains quartz, a special crystal that creates electricity when squeezed. As pressure increased, the box's lid could pop open, releasing gas. Ancient drawings found in the Serapeum show stones stacked on top of the boxes, which might have been used to make the lids even heavier and help produce more electricity. Thousands of years later, when explorers opened these boxes, they only found bull bones, maybe because all the organic material had disappeared over time. Scientists still aren't sure if the massive stone boxes were actually ancient energy systems, so the mystery lives on.
There you are, trekking across a desert on foot. It's hot, you're terribly thirsty, and now you gotta walk around this stupid wall. Wait, a wall in the middle of a sandy, lifeless nowhere? Exactly, a wall in the northern Saudi desert. Archaeologists have just made a super exciting discovery, and what they found was not just a single wall. No, it was a whole ancient walled city that might date back to 2400 BCE. They think this place was home to around 500 people and could have been used for 1,000 years. This discovery is groundbreaking. It means that the area could have been way more advanced than anyone expected. This city was well organized, with different zones for living, towers and strong walls for protection, and different sections for all kinds of daily life. This ancient city, now called Al-Natah, was basically an oasis town. And it's great since it can give us a peek into what life might have been like in this desert thousands of years ago. Apparently, they had clearly separated areas, like residential sections, a cemetery, farmland, and even a town center. This oasis city, found in the Khaybar area, is the first big organized settlement from the 2nd or 3rd millennium BCE that researchers have uncovered in northwestern Arabia. The first surveys show that this town, which covered about 6 acres, had several districts, including the residential area, the cemetery, and the legal one, with courts. The houses were set up in neat rows, all connected by small roads. Those streets kept the residential area separate from the rest of the town. Back then, most people in this region were nomadic herders, always moving around. But archaeologists have been sure that during the Bronze Age, Northwest Arabia had small walled towns and oasis centers scattered across it. These connected oasis towns were unique, offering secure places for people to live, store goods, and trade. They started showing the beginnings of urban planning, which hints that people of that time were already starting to settle down and organize communities more seriously. The research team estimated that there were about 50 homes in Al-Natah, but that number could go up to 70 as they keep digging. They think that a few hundred people lived there, and probably one of the coolest things is that some houses went up to 3 stories tall. Built on a slope near a couple of major trade routes, this city was set up in a prime spot. Now, one of the most impressive things about this place is its water supply. The oasis had springs and aquifers, which are underground water sources, and such conditions were perfect for farming. Those water sources meant residents could grow their own food, making the town self-sufficient. The outer walls probably helped control who could enter the town and get access to its resources. This settled way of life was an impressive shift from nomadic living to a more agro-pastoral lifestyle, which means a mix of farming and herding animals. Another find that supports this theory is a bunch of tools, like grinding stones, mortars, and pestles, discovered inside the town. People there must have ground grains and prepared food. They had a diet of cereals, meat, and milk from animals they raised themselves. These astonishing findings show that the inhabitants of the town could easily feed themselves, and were surprisingly advanced for that time. Thanks to better access to Saudi Arabia in the past couple of decades, archaeologists now have a much clearer picture of what life there was like thousands of years ago. The most exciting thing is that Al-Natah might have been part of a whole network of similar fortified oasis towns spread across the region, and all of these connected sites could show us how trade routes and small settlements worked together at that time in that arid area. Now, at the same time, this recent discovery isn't the only one that has the scientific world buzzing with excitement. How about we visit Egypt and see for ourselves? After all, archaeologists have just found a stash of ancient Egyptian and Greek treasure underwater. They were exploring the lost city of Thonis Heraklion off the coast of Egypt, which sank more than 1,000 years ago. This city was legendary, and nobody even knew where it was until it was rediscovered in 2000. Now they're uncovering more and more, and on this dive, they found a pile of gold and silver treasures. Those were probably used in rituals to bless Egyptian pharaohs when they took the throne. The researchers even found an ancient Greek temple dedicated to Aphrodite and some super-old Greek weapons. Frank Gaudio, the lead archaeologist, said it was astonishing that those delicate objects had survived the disaster that brought the city down. Back in its prime, Thonis Heraklion was one of the biggest port cities in the Mediterranean. It was a huge center of social life and was the main entry point for ships from Greece coming into Egypt. But tragically, due to rising waters, earthquakes, and a catastrophic tidal wave, the soil underneath the city literally turned into mush, and then the entire city sank into the Mediterranean. It was forgotten until Gaudio's team found it in 2000. Since then, they've been uncovering new parts of the city and piecing together its history little by little. If a lost underwater city doesn't seem impressive enough, we can travel to the Amazon. The discovery made there is truly mind-boggling. For centuries, people have talked about lost cities deep in the Amazon, like El Dorado, that mythical city of gold that lured Spanish explorers into the jungle. A lot of them never came back. Then, in the 1900s, a British explorer named Percy Fawcett went searching for what he called the lost city of Z, and he too disappeared. But now, finally, scientists have actually found proof that those lost cities in the Amazon were real all along. A team of scientists use a tech called LiDAR, which basically allows you to see through thick jungle from above by bouncing light beams off the ground. They flew over the jungle in Bolivia in a helicopter about 650 feet up and mapped out those hidden ancient cities. What they found were ruins of a huge urban settlement built by the Kasarabi people who lived there from 500 to 1400 CE. And it wasn't just a couple of buildings here and there. No, the LiDAR maps revealed massive urban centers, pyramids, platforms, roads, canals, and causeways, all carefully laid out. Turns out the Amazon wasn't just an untouched jungle. It was once home to big, complex cities. A scientist from the German Archaeological Institute explained that Europeans had long ignored the possibility of ancient Amazonian cities, but the LiDAR maps showed they were wrong. The new maps have revealed 26 sites, including 11 that no one even knew existed. Researchers have discovered two main city sites, Landivar and Kotoka. They had massive moat causeways stretching out like spokes on a wheel, linking the main cities with smaller surrounding settlements. Some of the canals even connected the cities to rivers and a big lake, which allowed water to flow through the area. Over the years, scientists found scattered ruins all over this region, but the thick jungle made it nearly impossible to connect the dots and see if or how they were related. With LiDAR, the whole layout came to life, showing that those sites were part of a much larger organized urban system. It's now also clear that the sites had a greater meaning, since everything is lined up in a way that could be symbolic of the spiritual beliefs of the inhabitants. The Kasarabi culture isn't as famous as the Maya, but they had a thriving society in an area that faced huge challenges, like yearly flooding. And although the nearby Andes had their own monumental sites, the Kasarabi were doing something absolutely unique. They even had reservoirs to store water, which suggests they might have been dealing with occasional droughts, which is pretty unusual for the Amazon. Actually, those terrible droughts could be why the Kasarabi eventually left their cities around 1400 CE.
Hey there, curious history buffs! Have you heard the legend of the ancient race of giants of Nevada? Yes, I'm talking about actual giants that allegedly lived thousands of years ago. Now I know what you're thinking. Giants, really? Well, archaeological finds add fuel to this debate too. And here's where it gets interesting. Lovelock Cave was indeed used as a burial site, and some of the remains found there are much larger than average human bones. The cave is by the Humboldt Sink in western Nevada. It was once part of an enormous lake, which eventually dried up, leaving a number of smaller ones, including the Humboldt Sink. The cave became the home of the Site-Ka tribe. According to the legend, these red-haired giants were so big that they had to be buried in the cave itself. Indeed, later on, archaeologists discovered 8 to 10 foot tall skeletons. This legend started to unfold when a mining engineer named John T. Reed talked to the locals in 1886. Once Reed saw the cave, he knew he was onto something. The news spread soon, but the cave was attracting another type of attention too. The deposits of a fertilizer known as guano were discovered inside the cave. So a mining company began excavating the precious resource in 1911 and soon shipped more than 250 tons of the fertilizer to San Francisco. Unfortunately, some of the human remains and artifacts were neglected and lost in the mining process. This led to an official excavation in 1912 and 1924. After the top layer of guano had been mined, strange objects started to surface. Around the area, the earliest evidence of human habitation dates back about 4,000 years. The Lovelock culture lasted for some 3,000 years, and they left us with 10,000 stunning artifacts. The pits in the cave were like a series of time capsules hidden at different depths. Archaeologists determined the age of each pit by its depth. It turns out that many different groups used the cave for storage over a really long time, and the things they stored there give us a really cool glimpse into their cultures. It's like a giant ancient storage unit full of hidden treasures. What have the researchers found besides the giant bones, you might ask? Some other bodies were mummified using a method similar to the one applied by ancient Egyptians. These remains also had something in common with the bodies discovered as far south as Lake Titicaca. Both mummies had some red hair, yet there are scientists who believe this reddish hue is the result of the interaction with the environment in which the bodies stayed. So, while the story of the red-haired giants may be a wild and intriguing tale, not everyone is convinced. Some experts believe that the bones found in Lovelock Cave are simply the remains of prehistoric animals, like mammoths or sloths. But others insist that there's something more to the story. Other relics, such as finely crafted baskets and exquisite duck decoys made from tule fibers, were also found there. In any case, this cave is worth the attention it gets. By the way, you can still visit this cave today and see the pits of different depths with your own eyes. But let me tell you one thing, it's in a hot, dry, and isolated place. Archaeologists have made another discovery that seems to be straight out of a legend. They think they found the palace of the one and only Odysseus, who was the legendary Greek king of Ithaca and the hero of Homer's epic poem. Move over, Indiana Jones. We've got some real-life adventure happening here from around 1300 BCE. Apparently, this is the only palace mentioned in Homer's epic poems that hasn't been found. The excavations have been made on the Ionian Islands, and the view from the ruins found on the island of Ithaca are exactly as described in the Odyssey, says the professor who led the excavation team. Known to the ancient Romans as Ulysses, the Greek hero took 10 years to return home to Ithaca after the fall of Troy. For many years, Homer's other epic, called the Iliad, which tells the story of the protracted siege of Troy by the Greeks, was regarded as a myth too. But then, in the 1870s, Troy was rediscovered, in modern-day Turkey's Çanakkale city. So, if they found Troy, who's to say they couldn't find Odysseus' home? The researchers were following Homer's words as a roadmap. The excavation site has a building complex with 2 levels. It has important finds, such as storerooms and workshops, a complicated drainage system, and fragments of pottery. It also has a well from the 8th century BCE, which is around the time when Odysseus is believed to have been the king. Yet, not everyone is convinced that the team has actually discovered the home of Odysseus. A British researcher named Robert Biddlestone insists that Homer's description of ancient Ithaca isn't very similar to the island that now has its name, and that Odysseus' kingdom was actually on the Isle of Cephalonia. However, Italian archaeologist Adriano La Regina might have a more realistic approach to this debate. He says that whether this find has a connection to Ulysses or not, what's more important is the discovery of this royal palace. Once upon a time, in a land far away, the Klamath Indians spread a legend about the creation of Crater Lake. Okay, maybe this land is not that far away, and it still exists. You can find it in south-central Oregon, in the western United States. Anyway, the legend has it that this lake was formed in a vicious battle between 2 volcanoes, Mount Mazama and Mount Shasta. Then the spirits of Earth and the Sky, which are Lao, who ruled the below world, and Skell, the chief of the above world, joined the fight. It turned into a geological drama. During the battle, darkness veiled the land. The fight was over when Mount Mazama collapsed and sent Lao back into the underworld. Then the rain filled the pit and created a lake in the place where the mountain had once stood. Flash forward to our time. Scientists have discovered that Mount Mazama did erupt 7,700 years ago. Artifacts found in the area prove that the legend indeed contains some details about the explosion. The tale says that red-hot rocks were flying through the sky. This happened during the volcanic eruption that caused the mountain to collapse. This created the volcanic caldera, which later on got filled with water. What makes this legend came true story unusual is how long it has existed. According to researchers, these types of verbal stories lose their credibility within 600 to 700 years. That's why the legend about the creation of Crater Lake is so unique. So many generations, for hundreds of years, have been accurately passing down the information. This volcanic crater lake is now in a national park. It's famous for its deep blue color. The water in it is extremely clear. If you visit it today, the water you'll see won't be the same as for someone who will visit the place 250 years later. Because there are no rivers flowing into or out of the lake, the existing water evaporates and the lake gets filled again by rain and snowfall. Basically, every 250 years, the water is replaced. Plus, this lake is almost 2,000 feet deep, which makes it the deepest lake in the United States. Swimming is okay in the lake, but there's only one legal and safe trail to get to the shore. There are other activities, such as fishing and boat tours. Shared human experiences, such as birth, marriage, and aging, may explain why certain tales are shared globally. Similar struggles and obstacles faced by humans around the world generate similar themes in traditional stories about love, parenting, and mortality. So, do you have legends or tales you've heard of from your grandparents? Who knows? Maybe your ancestors too witnessed a cool historical event.
Welcome to Rapa Nui, better known as Easter Island. It's a tiny speck in the vast Pacific Ocean, 2,200 miles away from the coast of Chile. This island is most famous for its eerie moai statues. This place is also home to one of the most mysterious writing systems in the world, called Rongo Rongo. We found it on 27 small wooden tablets. For years, historians have been arguing about the true history of these tablets, and now we might have found the truth. Humans first set foot on this island in the 12th century. For many years, it was home to the Rapa Nui people. They were pretty isolated out there in the Pacific Ocean until Europeans arrived in the 1720s. Europeans brought with them lots of troubles, leaving only a small fraction of the native population alive. Later in the 19th century, a missionary, Eugene Iro, went to the island and discovered the wooden tablets with intricate symbols carved on them. He wrote how marvelous they are, but there are hundreds of them on the island, and that they can be found in every household. But unfortunately, not all of them survive to this day. We've only got 27 of them. Some of them were heavily weathered, burned, or otherwise damaged, and now they're scattered all over the world in museums and private collections. Some of the language's artifacts were carted off to Tahiti and then to Europe by Europeans, leaving none behind on Easter Island itself. The 4 sacred tablets found their home in a congregation in Rome. They were the ones used in the recent discovery. For years, historians have been arguing whether this writing system was made up by the islanders themselves or they borrowed it from Europeans. To find the truth, they decided to use a technique called radiocarbon dating. All organic materials, like wood, charcoal, and so on, contain a tiny amount of a radioactive form of carbon called carbon-14. When life comes to an end, things stop taking in carbon-14, and the amount they had starts to decay over time. By measuring how much carbon-14 is left in a sample, we can assume how old this sample is. This is how we learn the age of many fossils and artifacts. So, they looked at the age of some Rongo Rongo tablets. 3 of them were crafted from trees grown in the 18th or 19th century, which aligns with the arrival of Europeans. However, one of them is older than the Europeans' first visit to the island. There are 2 reasons to believe that Rapa Nui people created this writing system themselves. First, Rongo Rongo works differently from European languages. Decoding it is a pretty hard task. Unlike English, this language boasts over 400 unique glyphs, none of which resemble any known writing system. There were many attempts to decipher this language, and none of them were successful so far. And second, one of the tablets is shown to be from around the 15th century, before the Europeans arrived. The problem is that radiocarbon dating can only tell us when the wood the tablet was made from was cut down, not when the writing was put on it. And since we've only got one tablet to go by, this isn't enough to be completely sure. On the other hand, why and where would they preserve cut wood for over 200 years just to grab it and write something on it one day? But anthropologists and historians say that it's possible. Scarce wood resources might have led the islanders to reuse old driftwood, which could be centuries older than the writing itself. This is known as the old wood problem in archaeology. Plus, the tablet looks very preserved. It was maintained to protect it from wood-damaging insects, humidity, and so on. That's why it survived over the centuries. Whatever is written on it, it was probably important for the Rapa Nui people. Now, all of these are guesses and clues, but scientists are cautiously optimistic. They believe that Rongo Rongo could be one of the rare instances of independent writing invention, like those of the Sumerians or the Egyptians. But we need more evidence. In the Rapa Nui language, Rongo Rongo means to recite or to declaim. Not everyone could write, only a select few. Probably only the elite of Easter Island, mostly men, knew and could read this written language. After colonization, none of them survived. So now we have to rack our brains trying to figure out what's written here. First, scholars can't agree on what type of script it is. We aren't even sure that this was their language. But even if it was, we don't know whether it's a primitive form of writing or a fully developed system. In the 1990s, a linguist, Stephen Roger Fisher, believed he might have cracked the code of Rongo Rongo's structure. His idea was that these tablets conveyed cosmogonies. Cosmogonies are stories or narratives that explain how the universe was created and how natural phenomena came to be. They often come from ancient traditions and cultures, like those found in East Polynesia. The tablets could have talked about things like how the world began, where everything came from, and how different aspects of nature, like the stars or the mountains, were formed. This would also explain why only the wise elite could write. Fisher thought that Rongo Rongo is a mix of logographic and semasiographic systems, which means that some symbols represent spoken words, while others represent ideas or concepts. but deciphering them would be very hard because it requires extensive memory and knowing context, because the symbols are more like hints than complete expressions. However, other language experts disagreed with his ideas, saying there were problems with how he put together his theory. Unfortunately, Fisher couldn't prove this hypothesis. Maybe these are just drawings. If we look at the tablets, there are some things that look recognizable: people, animals, plants, and geometric shapes. There are some birds. One of them looks like a frigate bird, which Rapa Nui people associate with the deity Maki Maki. There are also fish, centipedes, and so on, or at least these glyphs look like them. Could it be just art or a form of decoration? Maybe, but there are some problems. The glyphs show a high degree of complexity and structure. They also keep the same style. For example, there are several symbols that show something human-like with a raised hand. The only difference is different heads. As if it wasn't complicated enough, this unique writing style also uses a system known as reverse boustrophodon. This means that each alternate line is flipped upside down, resembling nothing seen elsewhere. We don't know why they would turn the tablet upside down after each line. But all this shows that they had some sort of system and organization behind these symbols. Plus, it seems like they use these tablets every day for some practical purpose. But there's some hope for the future. New technology, like AI and other computer programs, might help us understand lost languages. We already started creating algorithms that could help us solve other mysteries, like the Voynich manuscript. Academics even organized the Vesuvius Challenge, a machine learning competition that, in 2023, cracked the riddle of the ancient Herculaneum scrolls. The scrolls were buried under volcanic mud after the catastrophic eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD. In real life, the scrolls are very fragile, so deciphering them would be a very hard task. But with digital scanning and machine learning, it's much easier. They have a rich history. They most likely belong to the personal library of an Epicurean philosopher named Philodemus. These scrolls contain very important insights into Greek philosophy and Latin literature. If we decipher more of them, we'll learn more about the rich history of the Roman Empire.
Strange and amazing items are discovered often, but figuring out what our ancestors were up to is pretty tough. Especially when all you have are just some rusty cups and cave drawings. It's no surprise that even the experts in lab coats sometimes make mistakes. But it's not just about dusty plates and huge stones. Sometimes there's even humans with large heads. So grab your digging tools and let's travel back to ancient times to explore incredible societies that even scientists can't fully explain. Sardinia may look idyllic now, but I'm not gonna lie, I wouldn't fancy visiting it 3,000 years ago. Rumor has it, terrible giants roamed around this island back then. People even talk about finding human skeletons over 13 feet tall there, although nobody's ever shown anything to prove it. But the stories will make you wonder because some weird stuff has definitely happened. In 1974, over 5,000 pieces of broken stone artifacts were found in a part of the island called Monte Prama, but instead of being displayed in a museum, they were locked up in an underground vault for about 30 years. Sounds a bit suspicious, doesn't it? When they were finally displaced in 2005, scientists put the pieces together to find statues of 38 giant men standing 8 feet tall. Not quite as tall as the legendary skeletons, but still pretty huge. It's thought these statues were made by the Nuragic people, who lived on the island a long time ago. Besides giant statues, they also built over 8,000 massive stone buildings. Perhaps Nuragic weren't giants themselves, but they definitely liked their things big. I do too. I like a big number of likes on our videos. That would be pretty great. Thank you if you liked this and subscribed. Now back to the video. You and I are pretty smart, but we might not be the smartest humans ever. Actually, we might not even be the smartest species. Since 1913, some skull fossils found in South Africa have hinted at a possibly smarter contender called Boskop man. This human-like species might have lived as recently as 10,000 years ago. Their skull suggests they had really big heads, which means their brains could have been 30% bigger than ours. Wow! Their average IQ could have been around 149, making them among the smartest 0.05% of people today. But if a Boskop brainiac was so much smarter, why are they not around and we are? Well, bigger isn't always better, you know. Our brains are a lot bigger than our ape relatives, mainly in the prefrontal cortex. This part helps with high-level tasks like making decisions, remembering things short-term, and being aware of ourselves. The parts of the brain that handle our senses and movements haven't really grown much. So, maybe the Boskop spent too much time dwelling on the past rather than doing practical things like hunting. But this is all just guessing. We really don't know what happened to these clever cousins of ours. Some people even argue that Boskops weren't any different from us, with the only evidence being parts of skulls. The jungle is huge. Did you know the Amazon rainforest is home to about 30% of all the world's plant and animal species? That's impressive. However, the history of one native species, humans, has long puzzled scientists. The mysterious Kasarabe people lived here for hundreds of years and then vanished around 1400 AD. People thought the Amazon only had a few scattered tribes, but recently we discovered big, unusual shapes in the ground called geoglyphs. These might look like simple shallow ditches, but they're actually the remains of a vast civilization that spread over 5,000 square miles and includes about 450 markings, some as wide as 1,300 feet. That's insane! They likely contained ceremonial buildings and could have hosted up to 1 million people as recently as 550 years ago. Thanks to new technology like LiDAR, which uses a safe laser to map the forest without harming it, we can explore deeper. In 2019, some scans showed miles of raised roads and pathways and even pyramids over 70 feet tall. They found 26 separate settlements, 2 of which were at least 250 acres each. Damn, that's like 330 soccer fields. It's not certain what happened to the Kasarabe people. Maybe European conquistadors drove them out. Maybe the most baffling ancient civilization is one we've never actually found a trace of. Yep, I'm talking about Atlantis, the grand city that supposedly sank into the ocean. The first mentions of Atlantis come from the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, who talked about a great city near the Strait of Gibraltar. But for ages, everyone just thought Plato made up Atlantis as a perfect version of his own Athens. So why, about 12,000 years after it supposedly vanished, do we still wonder if it might be real? Well, in the 19th century, U.S. Congressman Ignatius Donnelly wrote a book giving 13 reasons why he thought Atlantis was more than just a myth. Then, in 1965, some folks thought they actually found Atlantis when they discovered the Richat structure, a massive 25-mile-wide dome in Mauritania, Africa. It's so big that you can see the whole thing from space. 2 astronauts flying over the Sahara Desert spotted this giant eye staring back at them and thought they'd made the discovery of a lifetime. Unfortunately, there's no solid evidence linking this structure to Atlantis. It's believed to have formed from volcanic activity about 100 million years ago. But it does look suspicious, doesn't it? Still, we're no closer to knowing the truth. Imagine going back to about 3,300 BCE and finding yourself in South Asia. Welcome to the Harappan civilization. These people were way ahead of their time. They had cities like Harappa and Mohenjo Daro, complete with baked brick houses, sophisticated drainage systems, and even public baths. This place might have had over 5 million people, making it one of the densest regions at the time. They also invented a system of standardized weights that was incredibly useful for traders. And trading they did. These people had connections stretching all the way to the Middle East, thanks to their great skills in metallurgy. They even had a form of ancient branding. The seals were used to stamp clay on trade goods. Despite being so advanced with a thriving urban life, there's a whole bunch of mystery shrouding their language and script. We've got bits and pieces of their writing, but no one's deciphered them yet, even with all the technology we have today. We also still don't know how exactly their society worked. It looks like they didn't flaunt their social status as much as other civilizations. No grand palaces or massive monuments. Instead, their largest buildings might have been granaries. They sure were practical. Unfortunately, all good things must come to an end. Around 1800 BCE, this bustling civilization started to decline, possibly due to shifts in river patterns. As the environment changed, the Harappans packed up, moving towards more hospitable lands. Ever heard of the Minotaur? The beast with a bull's head and a man's body, hunting the bravest travelers in a massive maze. Well, this wasn't just any old tale. It was one of the most popular dramas of the ancient world, and it was inspired by this place, the island of Crete. The Minoans lived here during the Bronze Age. They had stunning palaces, amazing frescoes, and a culture so rich it still fascinates historians to this day. They built places like Knossos, which was so complex with its multi-story buildings and elaborate hallways that it might have inspired the whole labyrinth myth. Their engineering was so ahead of its time that even their drainage systems were more advanced than what many of us have today. Let me know in the comments which of these stories you find the most fascinating, and thanks for watching.
You're traveling through Google Earth to find the perfect vacation spot when suddenly you come across something pretty unusual. It's a desert, ocean, forest, and lake all in one place. Lake Repa in Senegal got its pink color from the algae producing a red pigment absorbing sunlight. White beaches and sandy dunes separate the lake from the Atlantic Ocean. The best time to see it is from November to June, during the dry season when it's the brightest. Around 3,000 people work at the lake every day, collecting salt that it's full of. Because of that, the fish living here are 4 times smaller than those in a normal environment. The lake is also famous because the Dakar Rally used to have its finish line here. You reach for a soda and accidentally scroll down from your new favorite destination. 2 minutes of scrolling later, you realize you've found an introvert's dream. The island of Tristan da Cunha is an active volcano that hosts the most remote permanent settlement in the world. It's home to around 250 people, and their nearest neighbors are 1,800 miles away. Talk about distant relatives. The only way to get there is by boat, and it's a 6-day-long trip from Cape Town. You need special permission to set foot on the island, and ticket sales are super limited. Well, let's scroll back to civilization. The Atacama Desert in Chile looks like a pretty empty place, except for, is that a giant hand? This art piece by a local artist is about as tall as a telephone pole. They have to scrub off words and phrases left on the hand by vandals who travel here despite the remoteness of the structure. We still have plenty of places to go, so let's move on to, wow, looks like there's a bird inside a volcano in the Mexican state of Baja California. A team of over 100 people worked on this piece of art. They wanted to create an identity for a local tribe that believes vultures are wise teachers for humans. Yeah, vultures. The place is free to visit, but you'd have to hike to the peak of the hill to see the bird. Time to get under the water. You wouldn't expect to see much except for corals and fish, but here it is. The Cancun Underwater Museum of Art has a total of 500 sculptures standing in 3 separate galleries. Most of them are designed by a British sculptor. The idea of the museum is to save the nearby coral reefs by giving divers a cool alternative destination. Now let's get out of the water for a moment and dive back in here. Looks like there's some researchers working and living at 63 feet below the surface. This is Aquarius Habitat in the Florida Keys, an underwater scientific lab. Scientists nicknamed aquanauts can stay here on their research missions for up to 10 days. And this must be a giant Mickey head. This is the largest Mickey in Walt Disney World, and it's a solar farm with a power of around 1,000 residential solar rooftop systems. It's feeding renewable energy to the park. Let's check out a less famous spot. Clinton F. McClintock State Wildlife Station. Ooh, that's a mouthful. Looks like a regular state park in West Virginia. Let's zoom in and walk around a bit. Everything is all right here except, whoa, is that a human-sized fly? Moving on, let's zoom in here over the north rim of the Grand Canyon. A little further. It looks like a polka dot pattern near the cinder cone volcano called Vulcan's Throne. The desert around the canyon is home to plenty of red harvester ants. What you see here is their nesting mounds surrounded by bare grounds. Scientists call it the Las Vegas of ants. All the way on the other side of the world, in England, there is a dinosaur casually walking down Balderton Gate in Newark-on-Trent. Must be the only surviving T-Rex. Scrolling further, and is that another dinosaur in the water? Let's take a closer look. Turns out it's not a dinosaur, but a giant snake skeleton off the shore of the Loire River in France. It looks different day to day depending on weather conditions and tide levels. And no, real snakes don't have skeletons like this. This is how the Chinese artist who created it saw the serpent. Let's visit Africa again. What is this giant spiral on the ground? Could it be a secret message or maybe a portal? The ancient Egyptians probably left it centuries ago. In fact, it's an art installation called Desert Breath from 2007. The artwork covers 1 million square feet. The idea was to celebrate the desert as a state of mind. Hey, my mind has been a desert for years. Off the coast of Sudan, there's one of the largest shipwrecks you can find on Google Earth. It's a Bolivian cargo ferry that sank in 2003. Let's go further east. There are about 260 mysterious stone triangles in Saudi Arabia. They point toward a bullseye also made of stone. If you scroll a bit further, you can also notice desert gates with 2 thick walls. The purpose of the gates is still a mystery. Are those huge weird wheels on the ground? The ones in Jordan are all different in design. Some of them have spokes positioned in such a way to align with the sunrise on the winter solstice. Scientists believe the wheels in the Black Desert were built around 8,500 years ago. When flying over Kerala, India, you can't miss a huge vulture. It's the largest bird sculpture in the world, as tall as a bowling lane and as long as the height of the Leaning Tower of Pisa. The name of the bird is Jatayu, and it symbolizes the protection of women, their honor and safety. Next point, let's zoom in on it. This tiny island lies in a crater lake on an island called Volcano Island in Lake Taal, on the Luzon Island in the Philippines. There's another island in a lake on an island in a lake on an island in Canada's Nunavut territory that is thought to be the largest in the world. No human has set foot here, and it even has no name. It was discovered by Google Earth fans. The coldest, driest, and windiest continent of Antarctica must be hiding some mysteries too, like this cute creature off Zacelli Station. Could it be a giant extinct megalodon? It was the largest fish that ever lived, about 3 times as big as the largest sharks in the ocean today. Scientists found their fossils off the coast of every continent except Antarctica. So this could be a groundbreaking discovery if it turns out to be a real one. Hey, looks like there's another sea monster north off Antarctica. Could this black hole be Kraken himself? It used to scare sailors off the coasts of Norway and Greenland, so it probably moved to Antarctica over the centuries that it hadn't been seen. It had been probably inspired by a giant squid, so nothing is impossible with this one. Some locations on Google Earth are blurred for different reasons, like this one, the Yard of Orange Trees in Almeria, Spain. There's an administration office and a courthouse in the rectangular yard. The first orange trees were planted here in the 15th century. You can visit the yard in person, but can't see it on Google Earth. It's not clear why Google decided to blur Kos International Airport on the Greek island of Kos. It's a popular tourist attraction that gets plenty of visitors, especially during the summer months. Half of Moruroa Island in French Polynesia is clear, and the other half is blurred. You can't visit either of the parts anyways, as it used to be a place for nuclear tests. Sandy Island off the coast of Australia has been blurred out on Google Maps since 2012. It was discovered by Captain James Cook back in the late 1700s and could be seen on maps for 200 years. Then, Australian scientists set on a voyage to find it. All they saw was open water instead of an island the size of Manhattan. It must have been a mistake of cartographers who had first put it on the map. Oops. This just in, the world's oldest pyramid was built during the last ice age. And I'm not even talking about Egypt. I'm saying our ancestors might have spewed a 27,000-year-old pyramid in West Java. Gunung Padang is not exactly shouting pyramid. It's more of a mound with huge scattered stones tossed all over it. But local people seem to revere it, and they have for centuries. It wasn't until recently that the Indonesian authorities decided to excavate a bit deeper to see what all the fuss was about. They ended up finding the remains of a human settlement. It was rather unexpected, since the mound is pretty high up. This excavation could only prove there were humans in the area as far back as 45 BCE, which sounds reasonable. It was up to an Indonesian geologist named Donny Hillman to prove that Gunung Padang is the world's first pyramid. He used all sorts of new technology to support his claim. Our guy used carbon dating, which digs deep into the earth and takes whole chunks of soil. He found layers and layers of constructions, like he was digging up Rome and finding ancient buildings buried in the ground. His research proved that there had been caverns and even rooms down there, which could only mean one thing: humans. As for the rocks located up in the mound, they were most likely strategically placed by the people who lived there back in the day. They needed a place to meditate, so they arranged things in a harmonious way. Their smooth surfaces wouldn't be the result of years of erosion, but the works of great sculptures, the Michelangelos of their day, let's say. If this is all for real, then human civilizations began way before we think they did. Our ancestors, the Paleolithic humans, didn't have what it took to be considered a civilization, especially not the tools and knowledge to build pyramids. They needed a lot of masonry skills, which weren't all that available during the last ice age. His peers don't share this view, though. They could believe Hillman's theory if he had found evidence such as charcoal and bone fragments, but he didn't. Flint Dibble, another archaeologist, says that without concrete evidence of human activity, there's no proof of an actual pyramid. In this case, all the data proves is that the soil in the mound dates back to 27,000 years ago. He thinks the rocks on top of the mound just slipped down the hill like rocks normally do. Only a complex society would have managed to build a stepped pyramid like they claim it was. But according to Bill Farley, an American archaeologist, there's just no reason to believe there were any settlements in Indonesia during the last ice age. Now, just so you know, the oldest known ancient society with this kind of knowledge is probably 11,000 years old and used to occupy the region of modern-day Turkey. Take a look, Turkey's Göbekli Tepe. It's also not a pyramid, but it's the oldest monolithic construction made by humans. Back in the Neolithic period, a lot of people settled there, and there are proofs for it. For example, the walls there are covered in ancient drawings of clothing and wild animals. Until recently, the title of the world's oldest pyramid went to a three-sided construction known as the Djoser Pyramid in Egypt. Djoser is located just a few miles south of the Giza complex in a town called Saqqara. It made its way to popular culture more than once. In the 18th century, it became a common feature in European paintings. Young men from the cultural elite did a grand tour around the world, and Saqqara was at the top of their list. It was also featured in the video game Assassin's Creed, with a digital representation way more accurate than many historical drawings of the thing. That was kind of a big deal in ancient Egypt, to build pyramids for kings to spend their afterlives. And if you thought the Khufu pyramid was the oldest one in the world, well, Djoser was built 70 years ahead of that time. The development of new technology has allowed archaeologists to make groundbreaking discoveries, and a new, or should I say ancient pyramid in South America might win the title in dispute. It turns out that pyramids were also pretty fashionable in the Americas in the old days. Among them are the iconic pyramids of Guatemala's Tikal Temple Complex, the same ones that appeared in Star Wars No. 4. But to find the oldest pyramid in the Americas, one would have to travel to Peru. Deep in the Peruvian desert, archaeologists stumbled upon a sprawling ancient metropolis known as Caral. At first, researchers believed that the settlement was pretty recent, since the site was way too complex for ancient technology to handle it. As we said, Caral is a desert town, like Las Vegas, but without all the hoopla. This means no easy access to water. And for cities like these to thrive, they need a considerable irrigation system, which leads us back to complex technologies. The Peruvians surprised us all with this new discovery. This site was huge, filled with an amphitheater, houses, and religious buildings. The whole thing probably sprawled through 370 acres. And when scientists went to test their initial hypothesis using radiocarbon dating, they found that the city probably sprung around 2027 BCE. On the site, archaeologists found 6 pyramids that could possibly predate the one in Saqqara. As far as they know, both civilizations coexisted in the same time period, in opposite parts of the world. But since researchers can't pinpoint the exact age of Caral's pyramids, it's pretty hard to guess which civilization completed their pyramid first. If only we had a crystal ball. Now, it just so happens that the shape of a pyramid is something that nature is able to produce all on its own, leaving us modern-day humans a bit confused. A classic example is the Japanese site of Yonaguni, which also goes by the name of Japan's Atlantis. The entire monument is about the size of 5 football fields and the height of a 5-story building. Explorers and scientists believe that Yonaguni dates back to 10,000 years ago. For Japan's top marine geologist, Professor Masaki Kimura, Yonaguni is the heritage of a lost civilization. Kimura has dived into exploring the ruins over 100 times over the past 10 years. To him, there are clear signs of human activity down there. Check out this triangular-shaped pool on the monument's surface. Kimura thinks it's actual proof of humans, because this triangle-shaped concave is a historical symbol of water fountains in the region. As it happens with a lot of these cases, not all scientists are convinced the same. For many, Yonaguni is probably the result of thousands of years of erosion, and the fact that the monument is composed of one massive rock leads them to believe it is not really human-made. Sure, these huge basalt columns may look like the ruins of a palace, but they're most likely the result of the intense volcanic activity in the region. And speaking of natural formations that really look like a human made it, a pyramid on Mars has been a hot topic lately. Humans have been keenly trying to prove that there is life on Mars for quite some time. But some are stretching it really far, saying that little green or gray people built a pyramid on the planet to try and build their own civilization. This picture was taken over a decade ago by the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, the MRO, but it started to resurface recently. It shows what looks like a 3-sided pyramid. Some people claim that the smooth side of the pyramid could only be the effect of otherworldly work. Then science comes along and explains that Mars is home to one of the deepest canyon systems in the whole solar system. The so-called pyramid is located in what is known as the Kandor-Chasma region. This Martian region has a bunch of similar formations that are nothing more than the result of erosion. Nothing supernatural going on there, apparently.
There's this interesting ancient site near St. Louis, Missouri, that a lot of people don't know about. It's called Cahokia, and it used to be a huge city with up to 20,000 people living there back in the 11th century. It's full of these massive earthen mounds that were built by hand, and the biggest one is still there today, at the Cahokia Mound State Historic Site. Even though we don't know everything about this civilization, researchers have been able to piece together some information from the remains they've found. For starters, they found some pretty old teeth at this site. After studying their appearance and structure, scientists suggest that a lot of different indigenous groups lived there. About a third of them came from other areas in the middle of the continent, which they figured out by studying the different levels of various substances in the teeth. And get this, the way the mounds are arranged shows that this was actually a planned-out city, not just a bunch of villages grouped together. The rulers lived on top of the mounds, while everyone else lived in other structures. It's amazing to think that they were doing things like farming, hunting, logging, pottery, and weaving, all within this one giant city. Right in the middle of Cahokia, there was this giant mound that was about 100 feet tall, and around it, there was this huge wooden fence. Inside the fence was the city center, which had a big open space called a plaza. Archaeologists think that the plaza was designed to represent the 4 cardinal directions of the world, It was like the people who built it wanted to create a place that was in harmony with the universe. The center of the city was where they held ceremonies and events, and it was such a big deal that people from outside Cahokia would come to be a part of them too. What became of this city? Hard to tell. Some people think that the reason it fell apart is that they cut down too many trees and the land got all messed up. Other scientists believe that's not true because the soil was still in pretty good shape after the city was gone. The Europeans were not even around at that time, so they couldn't have influenced the downfall of Cahokia either. There's also one theory that suggests there were fights with other communities that caused the city to collapse. These days, there are over 65 preserved mounds, and you can even climb the steps of the tallest one. The best part is that local authorities are thinking of making it a national park, so you should totally plan to visit before it gets too crowded. Mohenjo Daro is another lost ancient city that's still surrounded by mystery. Located in modern-day Pakistan, it was a city that flourished during the Bronze Age, and it was extremely advanced for its time. It had things like water systems and fancy architecture that other cities didn't have back then. Despite these features, it's not as well known as other ancient cities, like those in Egypt or Mesopotamia. What's even weirder is that at some point, the city was abandoned, and no one knows why. Archaeologists found the city in 1911, but it took a while for them to realize how important it was. Eventually, they uncovered a lot of really interesting things about the city, like its advanced sanitation system. Excavations uncovered over 700 wells, as well as private baths and a large communal bath. Remarkably, even private homes had toilets, and waste was efficiently disposed of through a citywide sewage system. They also had a lot of trade connections and made some really beautiful objects, like pottery, jewelry, and figurines that were sold all over the region. Despite its amazing culture and knowledge, scientists have yet to figure out why the city was abandoned. Some people think changes in the nearby river might have had something to do with it. The writings that the people of Mohenjo Daro left behind are still a complex code, even for the most skilled specialists, making it even harder to piece together their history. Have you heard of the lost city of Kolmanskop? It used to be a small settlement in the Namib Desert. Legend has it that it got its name from a man named Coleman who got stuck in the local dunes and was never seen again. But that's not the interesting part. In 1908, a railway worker found a shiny stone and showed it to the chief railway foreman, who turned out to be a hobby mineralogist. They discovered it was a diamond, and soon, Kolmanskop became the richest town in Africa and one of the richest places in the world. It had luxurious stone houses, a school, a hospital, and even an ice factory to produce ice for fridges. The hospital had the first X-ray machine in southern Africa, which was supposedly used to check if workers were illegally swallowing diamonds. Its popularity began to decline in the late 1920s when another diamond-rich location was discovered nearby. Most of the inhabitants soon began to flee the city in search of a better life, leaving the buildings abandoned. In 1938, all machinery was taken south and the town was left to the desert. The last inhabitant left Kolmanskop between 1956 and 1960. The hot climate and low humidity have preserved the structures over time, and tourists can now visit this desert ghost town. You've surely heard about this next ancient city, Machu Picchu. It's this incredible ancient location in Peru. It stretches across a huge piece of land in the Andes Mountains and sits high above sea level. It's even considered one of the wonders of the modern world. But here's the thing. Scientists aren't exactly sure what it was used for. It could have supported up to 750 people, but there aren't a lot of human clues left behind. Some people think it was more of a spiritual or ceremonial place, while others believe it may have been like a fancy spa retreat for the nobles. The extensive terraces might mean it was used for crop testing or as a trading hub. And there's even a theory that it was used as a prison because they found a cell-like area too. It's amazing that even today, archaeologists and historians are still puzzled about how it was built. Did you know that they probably didn't even use wheels for transportation? And those massive granite rocks were somehow pushed up the steep Andean mountains, even though most of them weighed a lot. Some historians think that hundreds of people worked together to push each rock up the peak. The huge stones at Machu Picchu are also so close together that you can't see any cracks between them. It's pretty cool because it also makes the area safe during earthquakes, which is important since Peru is a shaky country. But how did the stones stay put during all those quakes? They actually move a little bit, but then they go back to their original spot, almost like they're dancing. Some people think wet wooden wedges were used to keep them in place, but that doesn't really add up, considering how big the structures are. Locals back then also seem to have built Machu Picchu without using any pack animals or iron tools. They had to sculpt and put everything together using mostly their hands. Plus, the citadel is built on a fault, so they had to move a bunch of stone and earth to make it flat. Scientists also think that the real construction is actually underground because of the deep foundations and drainage system. In fact, there's a hidden water system that was just recently discovered using 3D scanning. They didn't even use mortar to put the granite blocks together. They were so precise that you can't even fit a sheet of paper between them. One theory suggests that people that lived there used stone tools made of a harder material than the stone they were cutting.
You type Tonga Cliff Mystery into Google and this pops up. A rock. Yep, just a rock. At least at first glance. But it gets weird once you realize this is actually a 2-story tall boulder perched on top of a 120-foot high cliff in Tonga. And it's chilling there, at a whopping 128 feet above sea level. So, how the heck did this rock get there? First, a proper introduction. This is Makalahi, which means big rock in Tongan. This name hits the nail on the head because this baby stands at about 22 feet tall. That's taller than a giraffe standing on its tiptoes. And it weighs over 1,300 tons. And that's like stacking nearly 325 elephants on a giant scale. With those massive measurements, it makes total sense that the locals call it Makalahi. But from now on, we can also think of it as the giant tsunami rock. And to understand why, I've got to tell you the story of Makalahi in Tonga. In 2024, researchers from the University of Queensland's School of the Environment were exploring the southern side of Tongatapu Island. One day, they were chatting with a group of local farmers who mentioned a strange and massive rock sitting up on a cliff. And they were honestly pretty surprised. After all, it didn't make any sense for such a huge boulder to be located that far inland, especially since it's sitting about 656 feet away from the edge of the cliff. On top of that, it was covered in vegetation and surrounded by overgrowth, which suggests it's been sitting there for a long, long time. That's when they started asking themselves the big question: where did this rock even come from? So to figure it out, the team created a 3-dimensional model of the boulder and headed to the coast. After some careful research, they finally found the spot where the boulder could have originated. Turns out it broke off from a cliff more than 90 feet above sea level. Alright, so they found the source, but let's take a moment to recap what we know so far. The rock originally came from a spot about 98 feet above sea level, and now it's sitting at 128 feet above sea level. That's a pretty big jump. Sure, it's not like climbing Mount Everest or anything, but come on, it's a rock. It didn't just grab some gear and climb up there by itself. That brings us back to the big question. How did this massive boulder get up there? Well, it was probably moved by a tsunami. Yep, this rock could actually be solid ancient evidence of a tsunami. You see, we're talking about Tonga, an island country in Polynesia, part of Oceania. It's made up of nearly 170 islands with about 36 of them inhabited. The country is divided into 3 main island groups, the Vava'u, Ha'api, and Tonga Tapu archipelagos. The entire region sits right at the junction of 2 major tectonic plates, the Indo-Australian plate to the west and the Pacific plate to the east. It's part of the Pacific Ring of Fire, that giant horseshoe-shaped zone that wraps around the ocean basin. And if there's one thing we know about the Ring of Fire is that it's packed with intense geological activity. With lots of earthquakes and volcanic eruptions happening all the time, and those events can absolutely trigger catastrophic tsunamis. Tonga is no exception. According to Dr. Annie Lau, a coastal geomorphologist who took part in the study, Tonga has a long history of tsunamis for exactly that reason. Take the tsunami that hit the country at the beginning of 2022, for example. That catastrophic event produced waves as high as 66 feet, with water pushing nearly 0.62 miles inland. It was so powerful that, tragically, it claimed the lives of at least 6 people, and it was actually triggered by a volcanic eruption. So yeah, tsunamis are pretty common in Tonga, thanks to all that magma and tectonic activity constantly happening beneath the surface. And a massive, powerful wave is likely what carried Makalahi up onto the cliff. According to the study, this event may have happened around 7,000 years ago. That's even older than the first human settlement in Tonga, which is believed to have occurred roughly 3,000 years ago. Interestingly, that estimated timeline lines up with evidence of a massive tsunami that hit New Zealand's North Island, around 1,300 miles southwest of Tonga. The researchers had a theory. Now all they had to do was run the numbers to see if it was actually possible. So they measured the boulder's size and weight, then used that data to model how big a wave would have to be to push such a massive rock that far inland. Their findings suggest the boulder may have originally sat near the edge of a cliff, but was shoved inland by a tsunami. The wave lasted about 90 seconds and reached up to 164 feet in height. That's almost as tall as Niagara Falls. Just to give you a perspective, that's significantly larger than the waves recorded during the Indian Ocean tsunami in 2004 or the Tohoku tsunami in 2011. Now, here's the thing. These tsunamis were triggered by earthquakes, and waves caused by earthquakes usually top out at just a few tens of feet. So, in Makalahi's case, it probably wasn't an earthquake that did the job. Instead, it's possible the wave came from a landslide tsunami. This theory suggests that the earthquake not only generated a tsunami that flooded the island, but it probably also triggered a massive landslide. When a huge chunk of material suddenly slides into the ocean or something shifts quickly underwater, it can create a landslide-triggered tsunami, and that landslide, in turn, may have produced a second tsunami. One powerful enough to carry Makalahi and drop it where it still sits today. Now, while science may have found a likely explanation for how the rock got to such a strange location, many locals will probably continue to pass down the traditional stories tied to rocks like this one. According to Polynesian mythology, coastal boulders like Makalahi were placed by the legendary hero Maui. In some legends, Maui used a giant boulder and a magical rope made from the hair of the deity Hina to anchor the sun and slow it down. Another story is known as the Maui Throwing Stones. It refers to a group of 8 coral limestone boulders located in the village of Havelukilu on Tonga Tapu. The myth mentions that these massive stones were thrown to Havelukilu by Maui from the neighboring island of Eua. The story goes that Maui was annoyed by a rooster that woke him up every morning, so he picked up stones and hurled them at the bird. And that's how the rocks from Eua ended up in Tonga Tapu. Now here's the interesting part. The term white chicken in Tongan also means foaming waves, so some believe this story may actually be a metaphor for a tsunami. Even though these myths don't mention Makalahi directly, They show how important rocks like these are to local people. Now, we can say that this archaeological evidence is not only important for culture, but also for science. The recent study gives us some fascinating theories about how the rock ended up so high up and so far inland. But researchers still need to find what's called a landslide scar to prove their point and fully solve the Tonga Cliff mystery. Follow-up research is crucial because it will help us to uncover what triggers these kinds of events and how often that might happen. And who knows? One day we might come across new cases of giant rocks moved by giant tsunamis, each one carrying its own story from the deep. Whoa! It's a huge flying island right above your head. In the era of AI, you may think it's nothing but a neural network video, but let me tell you that first, it's very much real. Two, if you want, you can as well visit it. It may even hold the key to the El Dorado secret. This place is called Roraima, and it's actually not an island at all. It's a mountain. Due to a number of factors, we get this vision of an island floating somewhere above us. But it's all about the flat top this mountain has. There's no standard peak, so it looks flat and the thick clouds get blended into the skies, thus creating this optical illusion. Despite the advancements in satellite technology and affordable air travel, there are still few places on Earth that feel truly uncharted. Like Mount Roraima is one of them. It's been around for almost 2 billion years, and it's one of the oldest formations on our planet. For comparison, dinosaurs appeared somewhere around 240 million years ago. Some scientists believe that this area used to be a part of the supercontinent called Gondwanaland. And back then, it wasn't yet a mountain. When the supercontinent split apart, the erosion created this magnificent tabletop mountain. But what's interesting about this place is not the age, but the fact that it still looks prehistoric. It's almost untouched. The reason for that is late exploration of this part of South America. By the way, we still discover new flora and fauna species living there every year. For a mountain, it's relatively short, only 9,220 feet. There are cities located at a higher pitch above sea level, say La Paz in Bolivia, whose elevation is 11,940 feet. So people could be living in the area of Mount Roraima too, despite its hard-to-get location. But there's a twist to it. The Pemon people are the original inhabitants of this region, and they have an incredibly rich tradition of myths. For instance, their mythology features deities that live on the Tepui, which are flat-topped mountains found in the grasslands. These mountains are considered sacred and are off-limits to the living since they're believed to be the dwelling places of ancestor spirits known as moai. So, there are traditions that restrict living in this area, but still, some sources claim that local communities do dwell there. But, obviously, modern problems lie not only in the spirits, but in very much limited job opportunities there. However, guided tours are actually available. So what will you see if you ever dare to visit this place? At the base of the mountain lies an evergreen rainforest featuring trees that range in height from 82 to 150 feet, with some specimens reaching up to 200 feet. Some of them are endemic for sure, meaning that it's the only place in the world where you can find them. Like, you can find orchids as large as a medium-sized tree. It's not a surprise because due to the remoteness of this place, species here may have followed a completely different evolutionary trail, unlike most of the flora and fauna on our planet. Next, you have all the chances to stumble upon a waterfall at the base of Roraima that's been flowing for millions of years. Fun fact, there are no rivers on Roraima summit, but the rainfall seeping through the porous rocks create this incredible view. All combined together make it look like some lost world, right? By the way, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was inspired by Tepui, these tabletop mountains, when he was writing his The Lost World novel. Yep, it's not only Sherlock he was famous for. Among these natural wonders, Roraima stands out as the most accessible tepui. There are more similar formations, but they're way less trek-friendly. Yeah, amongst other mountains, Roraima may be the easiest to get to. But still, it is very hard to get there, even taking into account all the modern technologies. So, how did the discovery happen? Hard to say for sure, but there is a theory backed up by official records. Back in the 16th century, here was this Sir Walter Raleigh. Look at his fancy collar and mustache. He was one of the most important people during the Elizabethan period. In 1594, he got to know about a great golden city near the Caroni River. That idea stuck in his mind. Maybe it was something like a get-rich-quick scheme for him. Anyways, 1 year later, he went to explore what is now Guyana and eastern Venezuela, and he described precisely Mount Roraima. On March 22, 1595, an English fleet led by Walter Raleigh showed up off the coast of Trinidad. Raleigh tried to make nice with the Spanish settlers there by trading and even inviting them aboard his ships for some entertainment. After a few drinks, the Spaniards opened up about a person having some particular activities in Guyana, sharing insights about the land's geography and the treasures they believed were hidden inland. Fast forward to April 7th, Raleigh pulled off a surprise attack on the town of San Jose and managed to capture this very person. After squeezing him for information, Raleigh declared his own plan to head into Guyana on a quest for the legendary Golden City. Since his ships couldn't navigate the narrow channels of the Orinoco Delta, Raleigh had his carpenters modify one of them, likely a galleass, to only draw 5 feet of water. This ship could carry 60 men, while another 40 were split among smaller boats. Progress was slow as they navigated through the delta, getting lost in what Raleigh described as a labyrinth of rivers. Eventually, they made their way to the Caño Manamo, and then into the main Orinoco River. A bit further upstream, where the Orinoco meets the Caroni, Raleigh encountered a native chief named Topiawari, and they hit it off. Topiawari revealed that his people had been pushed out of inland Guyana by a fierce tribe from the west. This fed into the prevailing belief, shared by both the Spanish and Raleigh, that El Dorado was home to runaway Incas from Peru. Topiawari also mentioned that the invading tribe was rich in gold, claiming that their nearest town, just a 4-day trek south, was the source of gold plates that were being traded far and wide. But he hinted that even finer treasures lay deeper in the land. Raleigh then made his way to the mouth of the Caroni, but strong currents halted any further progress. He sent out 2 scouting groups on land, while he led a third one. They unearthed a few shiny stones that they eagerly dug out of the ground, but most turned out to be worthless. They learned that a massive lake about 40 miles wide lay at the head of the Caroni, filled with alluvial gold. However, with no way to move forward and the Orinoco's waters rising, Raleigh had to call off the expedition, hoping to come back when conditions were better. It wasn't until 1616, over 20 years later, that Raleigh got the go-ahead from James I for a second try in Guyana. He assured the king he could retrieve a lot of gold from a mine near the Caroni that he had heard about on his earlier trip. James specifically ordered him not to clash with the Spanish, who were still controlling the Orinoco area. When Raleigh arrived in South America, he stayed on the ship while sending Lawrence Kemmys and a team to look for the mine. For reasons that remain unclear, Kemmys ended up attacking and capturing the Spanish town of Santo Tomé, resulting in the demise of Raleigh's son Wat during the skirmish. Unable to find the mine, the crew returned to the ship, and facing Raleigh's anger, Kemmys took his own life. Back in England, Raleigh was put on trial for allegedly lying about the mine and trying to provoke a conflict with Spain, which ultimately led to his execution. Or maybe those were the Moai spirits who didn't appreciate the intrusion.
See this place on the map? Yeah, right there. It's estimated that around 100 people have vanished or lost their lives here. Why, you ask? Well, it seems they were all looking for this guy, Percy Fawcett. He was a British colonel, famous for his sharp blue eyes, perfectly groomed beard, and signature hat. He looked like a character from Pride and Prejudice, but lived more like Indiana Jones. In fact, this character was inspired by Fawcett's story. But his disappearance in 1925 was more macabre than any movie plot. Colonel Fawcett was bold. Not the ask your neighbor's Wi-Fi password kind of bold. I'm talking full-on, I don't care that much about my life bold. He used to be a soldier in Sri Lanka and even did a secret spy gig in Morocco, but he needed more. So in 1906, Fawcett started exploring parts of Brazil and Bolivia where no one had dared to go before. His mission was to create secret, mind-blowing maps. Okay, that doesn't sound too risky, but trust me, it was. If you want to explore the world nowadays, you just open Google Earth and, well, that's it. No danger, no adrenaline, just maybe one or two creepy street view photos. Ew. But we're talking about the beginning of the 20th century, when satellites and this weird Google car didn't exist. Back then, if you wanted to fill in the world map, you actually had to explore the land on foot. So that's how Colonel Fawcett ended up in South America. And he became famous for his expeditions to map out the wild Amazon. He was the first guy to record the locations of waterfalls in that region, for example. But then he got obsessed. Blame it on lack of sleep or whatever sketchy Amazon jungle juice he was sipping, but suddenly he was like, I'll bet there's an ancient advanced city hidden somewhere around here. Spoiler alert, there wasn't. But he was hooked on that idea. Hanging out with native Indians for so long convinced him that large groups could totally thrive in the middle of a massive rainforest. And of course, Fawcett loved a good old adventure story, especially the ones from the 16th and 17th centuries, written by European explorers. In those stories, adventurers claimed they had found huge settlements and fine roadways deep in the heart of Latin America. But Fawcett's all-time favorite story came from a manuscript written in 1753. Back then, adventurers were hunting for precious metals in Brazil when they stumbled upon a ruined city with monumental buildings, roads, and plazas. Oh, and every corner had a Roman-style spire. Naturally, the colonel was all in to find it. Too bad no one told him this manuscript is mostly considered a forgery. Yep, this story is as real as Snow White's. But then, things got weird. The settlement described in that manuscript was supposedly located in the northeast side of Brazil. But now, he's saying there's an advanced civilization in Mato Grosso, which is in a different part of the country. So he decided to name this new place the City of Z. Back in the 1920s, the colonel launched two separate expeditions to find it. But both trips failed, as he faced terrible weather, fever, and of course, exhaustion. Now, tell me in the comments, what do you think Fawcett did after two failed expeditions? Option A, he quit. Option B, he called his mom. Option C, he tried again because he didn't get the memo that the universe is clearly saying stop. Well, of course, option C is the right answer. This is relentless Fawcett we're talking about. So, 3 years later, the colonel finally gathered enough cash to launch yet another expedition in search of the City of Z. All he needed was a crew of people crazy enough to join him. Famous and experienced explorers were begging to come along. But nope, Fawcett decided to take his son and his best buddy instead. In January 1925, this brave trio set off on their journey. They packed mosquito nets, canned food, and made a promise, we shall return. Another spoiler alert, they didn't. Uh-oh. The journey kicked off in New Jersey, and then they sailed all the way to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. There, they stopped to grab some pack animals, like horses, and hired a couple of local guides. Now they were ready to head to the city of Cuiabá. Now keep in mind the distances in Brazil are crazy huge. So this little journey was like traveling from Miami to Chicago on foot. 3 months later, they finally ventured into the jungle for the first time. And that's when the fun really began. The crew faced piranha-infested rivers, an endless maze of thick trees, and the worst part, bugs. The constant annoying zzz of a gazillion mosquitoes wouldn't let them sleep, and Fawcett's best friend's foot got huge from tick bites. But the colonel didn't have time to babysit his friend's princess foot. Oh no, he was too obsessed to take a break. In fact, at some point, he was so far ahead of his companions that he had to camp alone for a night. On May 29th, Fawcett finally came to his senses. There was no City of Z. But did he let that stop him? Not really. He unpacked their gear and sent the local guides back to Cuba. But before saying a final goodbye, he asked them to deliver a letter to his wife, saying something like, "Don't worry, hon, our son is well and getting stronger every day." Sure he was. Anyway, after this dramatic farewell, the trio set off into the bush alone. The darkness swallowed the thick forest, and then they were never seen again. Okay, that was intense, so let's fast forward. 2 years later, the newspapers were still speculating whether the trio could still be alive, and Fawcett became a legend, like Bigfoot, but less hairy. One guy said that the colonel had become one of the locals and was living his happily ever after in the jungle. Another guy said he was held prisoner by the Indians, but no one could confirm any of these sightings. It wasn't until 1928 that the British authorities finally thought better late than never and decided to look for Fawcett and his crew. By that time, they were sure their expedition had perished, but they still needed proof. And after days and days of surviving the jungle's worst nightmares, they found, well, nothing. But in a weird way, this mystery inspired more explorers to look for them. It's estimated that about 100 people have passed away in this process, and a few have followed in the explorers' footsteps by disappearing without a trace. So, what really happened to the expedition? Researchers have pointed their fingers at everything under the sun: parasitic infections, starvation, drowning, jaguar attacks, you name it. Some even say Fawcett dove headfirst into mysticism and started an occult community in the jungle. The Brazilian anthropologist Orlando Vilas-Boas was probably the one who got the closest to solving this case. Back in the 1950s, he was working with the Kalapalo Indians when they suddenly admitted to, getting rid of Fawcett. They even had bones to prove it. But it turns out a forensic analysis showed that the remains didn't belong to the colonel. So we're back to square one, and nobody knows, to this day, whatever the heck happened to them. Fawcett's quest, as we know it today, is based on some pretty questionable sources. But there is a possibility that he wasn't living in Delulu land after all. Recent discoveries suggest that his idea of a sophisticated jungle city wasn't just pure fantasy. In 2024, a massive ancient city was found in the Amazon, hidden beneath dense vegetation. Evidence suggests it was built around 2,500 years ago, and it was surprisingly advanced, featuring houses and plazas, all connected by an incredible network of roads and canals. But this city was in a forest in Ecuador, not Brazil. So who knows? Maybe the legendary City of Z is still out there. Ooh. Scientists found an entire city of Gayangola that was hidden beneath the dense jungles of Mexico for 600 years. It covers 360 hectares, had over 1,000 buildings, 2.5 miles of defensive walls, a network of internal roads, and a well-planned urban layout with temples and ball courts, and separate neighborhoods for the elites and commoners. For centuries, people believed there was just an abandoned fortress there, based on stories passed on from generation to generation. Until recently, there was no way to see how truly huge it was without spending years on the ground. But thanks to the new technology, a remote sensing tool called LiDAR, they got a 3D model of the area in just 2 hours from a plane. Gayangola was built between the years 1350 and 1521. It was a crucially important place for the Zapotec people, a group that had lived in the area since around 700 BCE. In Gayangola, families lived together in homes with big patios in the middle, surrounded by rooms. When families got bigger, they built more rooms and made their homes larger. The study found that both the leaders and regular people worked together to make the city better. Because Gayangola was surrounded by mountains, they used this land wisely and built their houses in a way that fit the slopes and let rainwater flow naturally. This helped keep their homes safe and strong. They were built so well that many of these buildings are still standing, even after hundreds of years. There are 2 pyramids in the center of the city. They may have been used as temples where the priests celebrated rites and ceremonies to their deities. The priests brought offerings to the altars, and the people assembled at the 2 squares that are now sunken. Then, there is also a palace with 64 rooms, some of them with circular columns on several sloped terraces. There are patios with many stairways all connected to each other. The sensing tool also found a round-shaped lookout point on a natural rock, where the Zapotec people could see their foes approaching from a distance. Researchers also noticed 2 circular structures that could have been used to watch the stars and measure time. They also found some tombs, so there was most definitely a city cemetery. By the end of the 1400s, the Zapotec people controlled a large territory on the Pacific coast and had successfully defended their land from the Aztecs, who were trying to take over more territory. They did the almost impossible and survived a 7-month-long siege at Gyangola. When they won this conflict and kept control of the southern part of Mesoamerica, the Zapotecs didn't need to live in Gyangola anymore. Staying in the mountains had its pros, but they needed fresh water and good farmland to grow food. The small city of Tehuantepec, just 12 miles away, had these conditions, so they moved there just before the Spanish arrived in 1521. Over time, Zapotec traditions started to fade, but their culture didn't disappear completely, and more than 300,000 Zapotec people still live in Oaxaca state in Mexico. They speak their own languages and keep their traditions alive. Creating the 3D model of the lost city is just the beginning of the research. Archaeologists hope that future studies of Gyangola will help us learn more about how the Zapotecs were organized, how they ruled their cities, and how they interacted with the Spanish when they arrived. They plan to study all 1,100 buildings found in the LiDAR scan, and it will take a few years. Instead of digging up the ruins, they will use special technology to scan the land and learn more about the city without damaging it. This same tech helped scientists find another massive ancient city that lay hidden beneath the thick green canopy of the Amazon forest. A whole network of houses, plazas, roads, and canals was hiding in the shadow of a mighty volcano. For centuries, many scientists assumed that ancient Amazonian people lived in tiny huts, clearing patches of land to survive. But this city, built 2,500 years ago and inhabited for 1,000 years, proves the opposite. Now, scientists think tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of people lived in complex urban societies. Scanning the area found 6,000 rectangular platforms, each measuring around 66 by 33 feet, and standing 6 to 9 feet high. These structures were arranged in clusters around central plazas, with straight roads with perfect right angles and paths connecting them. One of the roads was 16 miles long. Building straight roads like this is far harder than just following the landscape. Some of these roads may have had deep spiritual or ceremonial significance. The volcano's rich soil helped the civilization thrive, but it may also have led to its downfall. Researchers also found signs of threats to the cities, such as ditches that block entrances to the settlements. Maybe some people living nearby were trying to get in. The next step for the researchers will be studying the adjoining 116 square miles to know more about this large, complex society that could be bigger than the well-known Mayan societies in Mexico and Central America. Meanwhile, in 1963, a man in Turkey discovered an ancient city while renovating his own house. He knocked down a wall in his basement and found a mysterious room. He kept digging and saw a tunnel. It led to the Derinkuyu underground city. It's one of the deepest multi-level underground settlements in Cappadocia and in all of Turkey. The inhabitants lived on 8 levels and had access to cellars, storage areas, chapels, a school, a study room, and other structures. All floors were connected by an extensive network of tunnels. The underground city was probably built as a shelter. The construction is hiding at 279 feet deep, and you can't see it from the outside. The complex was large enough to shelter about 20,000 people with their livestock and food supplies. There was also a 180-foot ventilation shaft. Archaeologists believe that Phrygians first built the levels. The Romans used and enhanced the structure later. The golden time of Derinkuyu was during the Byzantine era. The next lost and found city appeared only in a few inscriptions and ancient texts, so no one could be sure it really existed. Scientists searched the majority of the coast of Egypt, until one archaeologist and his team detected a colossal face looking at them from under the water. The ancient city of Thonis Heraklion was discovered completely submerged 4 miles off Alexandria's coast. In the ruins of the lost city, there were 64 ships, 700 anchors, and a treasure trove of gold coins. Archaeologists believe the 16-foot-tall statue and the temple remains are the most important findings discovered by the expedition. Back then, the city had ceremonies and celebrations that took place in the Temple of Ammon. The ruins and artifacts were made from granite and diorite, so they were in good condition even after having been in contact with water for centuries. They give people a glimpse into what life was like 2,300 years ago in one of the most important trade ports of the world. The city had a network of canals, sort of like an ancient Egyptian Venice. The canals linked many separate harbors and anchorages. Towers, temples, houses, and other structures were also linked by bridges. Thonis Heraklion was the country's main port for international trade and the collection of taxes. No one really knows how the city ended up submerged, but archaeologists connect it with natural causes. At the end of the 2nd century BCE, most probably after a flood, it got covered with water. Then Alexandria, the city founded by Alexander the Great, became more glorious than Heraklion. Before Alexandria's fame, Heraklion was the main port of entry to Egypt. So after the tragedy, many ships heading for Heraklion had to change their route and go to Alexandria. Heraklion lost its glory until its discovery in 2000. 1,000 years ago, near modern-day St. Louis, Missouri, there was a vibrant, bustling city called Cahokia. It was a Native American city, the largest and most influential one in Mississippian culture. At its peak, around 1050 BCE, Cahokia was home to as many as 30,000 people, making it larger than Paris at the time. But what's interesting is that Cahokia didn't have any big marketplace. Usually trade was the backbone of any big city, yet this one stood out for archaeologists. That's because Cahokia wasn't about commerce. It was about culture, community, and parties. The people who lived there threw massive parties that would last for days. The city's grandest feature was its 50-acre plaza, surrounded by amazing earthen pyramids. This massive space could hold over 10,000 people. Imagine them all gathering there for festivities, dancing, drinking coffees and teas, feasting on deer, and betting on sports. The events were super lively. Cahokians would wear awesome costumes, style their hair in interesting ways, and decorate their bodies with tattoos. Athletes were playing a game called Chunky, where they hurled spears at a rolling stone disc, competing to get as close as possible. The roar of the crowd filled the air, and performers showed off their skills. These celebrations were so wild, they left traces in history. After the parties ended, Cahokians cleaned up by tossing leftovers into pits. Archaeologists have uncovered these waste pits, and they were filled with food remains and pottery. One pit alone contained the remains of 2,000 deer, and that's from a single event. They also found traces of yaupon holly, a caffeinated plant that was traded from hundreds of miles away. This just shows how much effort and thought Cahokians put in their celebrations. Would you like to live in a city like this? But aside from all the fun and games, Cahokia was also deeply complex and spiritual. The city was built on a landscape that mixed dry land with swampy patches. Many people believe that this symbolized the connection between the world of the living and the dead. The people of Cahokia saw their city as a bridge between these two realms. They built earthen mounds, both for ceremonies and rituals, and as construction support. These mounds rose from the swampy areas. Meanwhile, people settled in the drier spots. Elevated pathways connected these neighborhoods, creating a physical link between life and death. Isn't it sad that some ancient metropolises that rival modern cities in scale just disappeared? Cahokia's story came to a quiet end around 1350 CE, when the city was abandoned, all due to changes in environments and weather, floods, and other problems. But the influence of Cahokia was so big, it spread to distant places. Some of their traditions, like Chunky and Yaupan tea, have survived in native communities to this day. Today, Cahokia is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it's not the only megacity we lost. About 5,000 years ago, people in the Indus Valley built some of the world's first cities. Mohenjo Daro was an ancient city in what is now Pakistan. The city was built around 2500 BCE, and back then, it was a thriving hub of the Indus civilization. Sure, it was much smaller than modern cities, but it was quite huge at the time, around 40,000 inhabitants. It looks like the locals were crazily strict and disciplined people. The city's planning and organization were incredible. It was laid out in a grid pattern. Streets and important buildings aligned along the north-south axis, probably to match the movement of the sun and moon. They also built one of the most advanced systems for water and waste management of their time. The city had about 700 wells. Nearly every house had its own. Most homes also had private bathrooms with drainages and even underground sewers. This shows how skilled these people were at staying clean. And with all this discipline, it looks like there were no kings, queens, or even a central government. They could still have some authority, like local elites or elected officials, just not a classic strict monarchy or religion. Instead, people there cared about simplicity and order. They basically managed themselves, having standardized ways of doing things, from the way tools and potteries were made to how they traded. Which is why, unlike many other cities, Mohenjo Daro didn't have grand palaces, temples, or monuments. Instead, they had public areas known as citadels. People gathered at citadels for rituals, meetings, and storage of grain. And it seems like this way of life worked perfectly. Scientists found some seals and weights, which means the economy was well regulated. Archaeologists found some intricate artifacts like ivory, lapis lazuli, carnelian beads, and gold jewelry. Another famous find is the small bronze statue known as the Dancing Girl, which was discovered in 1926. Mohenjo Daro wasn't poor at all. And they also pulled off some awesome buildings. Staying clean was clearly way more important to them than displays of wealth or power. So they created the Great Bath, one of the most famous structures in the city. It's a large, watertight pool built with baked bricks, perched on a mound of earth, being almost a religious place, the closest thing they had to a temple. Meanwhile, the city itself was built on a series of mounds. They grew taller over the centuries as people added new houses and structures. Why did the city fail? No one really knows. There's something mysterious about the sculptures archaeologists found. Many of them seemed intentionally broken. This means the city's later inhabitants, maybe invaders or something, destroyed them for some reason. Some scientists think that the Indus River may have shifted course, disrupting agriculture and trade. But there's no evidence of a flood or any big event like this. It just seems like, over time, the entire Indus civilization just gradually faded away. By 1900 BCE, the culture had shifted and didn't leave much behind. Let me tell you now about the ancient city of Kos, which is located where the modern town of Kos now stands in Greece. Imagine arriving by sea, and the first thing that hits you is the sheer grandeur of its agora, this massive public square built with stones in different colors, laid out on terraces that rise above you. It was one of the biggest in the ancient world, and it made a great impression on anyone approaching the city. This place has a rich history, dating back to around 2300 to 2200 BCE. A long time ago, local folk gathered up from different parts of the island to form a new city in the northeast. People have lived there since the Bronze Age, and over time, it became a super important center of culture and trade. And no wonder, since it's right near a natural harbor. The harbor was sheltered by two breakwaters, and people built some of the most important religious sites there, including the sanctuaries of Aphrodite and Hercules. Kos wasn't just beautiful, though. It had some brilliant design. The whole city was laid out in a neat grid, with streets crossing each other at perfect right angles, literally looking almost like a modern city. Thanks to this, moving around was super easy, and the blocks, or insulae, were big enough to fit several large houses. Kos remained largely unchanged until the 6th century CE. Over time, it started gradually shrinking in size, confined within the walls of what is now the Chora neighborhood. Meanwhile, Palmyra was an ancient city built around a beautiful oasis sometime around the 3rd millennium BCE. Originally known as Tadmor, this city flourished as a major stop on the Silk Road, linking the Near East with Asia. It was a thriving center of trade and culture. They had a marketplace, assembly buildings, grand gates. In other words, this place was bustling with life. The city has been through many hands throughout its history, from the Byzantine to Arab caliphates, which is probably why it had some awesome architecture. An interesting blend of Greco-Roman, Persian, and Arabic vibes. The Temple of Bel, the Great Colonnade, and a Roman-style theater. But, like all the others, it decayed over time. Palmyra's importance faded, and by the early 1400s, it had been largely destroyed. But at least its ruins remain. Right now, they're a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
Scientists discovered something Atlantis-like near Australia. There used to be an entire continent that's now underwater. Here's what happened to it. Around 70,000 years ago, during the last ice age, there was a huge landmass called Sahul. It was located in the southwestern Pacific Ocean. This ancient supercontinent connected what we now know as Australia, New Guinea, Tasmania, and the Aru Islands into one giant piece of land. Imagine lush tropical rainforests surrounded by beautiful mountains. Sahul's tallest mountains were in the New Guinea highlands, with peaks reaching over 13,000 feet. This beautiful place was home to a variety of unique animals, most of which were pouched creatures. But back then, they weren't just koalas and kangaroos. Sahul was filled with different types of grazers, burrowers, scavengers, and predators. It was home to a huge diprotodon, a powerful hunter Thiosolio, and a horrifying Megalania, a creature that's much larger than any living lizard today. It was a unique place because the rest of the world was filled with placental animals at the time, like wolves, elephants, and humans. In Sahul, the only normal mammals were bats and rodents. But not all its parts were the same. The Timor, Arafura, and Carpentaria regions were covered by hot savanna and dry forests. It looked kinda like modern Australia, hot air deserts with scrubland, steppe, and temperate forests along the eastern coast. Back then, people were migrating all across the world. They made an incredible journey from Southeast Asia to Sahul and first arrived here from 60 to 45,000 years ago. They mostly traveled by foot and crossed the sea using bamboo rafts and simple boats. They came there from an ancient landmass called Sunda, which includes parts of Southeast Asia. They traveled across a series of islands known as Wallachia and eventually spread across Sahul. And it wasn't a small journey. Sahul was huge, around 4.1 million square miles. That's bigger than the USA or Canada. It stretched from the equator to around the southern part of New Zealand. So they arrived in what is now Australia and became Australia's first people. Scientists think that Sahul had a population of 500,000. We've discovered cave paintings that date back around 40,000 years. It's a hunting scene depicting an anoa, or miniature buffalo, facing figures of humans and animals. Researchers are trying to figure out how these early settlers moved across Sahul and where we might find archaeological evidence of their journey. To do this, they created a landscape evolution model. The simulation showed how Sahul changed between 75,000 and 35,000 years ago. It showed potential migration routes and archaeological sites. Humans likely traveled along coastlines and rivers. But how did Sahul get submerged off the coast of Australia, similar to the mythical Atlantis? During the last ice age, much of the Earth's water was locked up in large ice sheets and glaciers. The sea levels were much lower than they are today. After that, the global temperatures increased. The ice sheets melted and the sea levels rose, flooding the land bridges that once connected different parts of Sahul together. About 8,000 years ago, New Guinea separated from mainland Australia, and then, about 6,000 years ago, Tasmania did the same. We still can explore the underwater parts of Sahul thanks to new technology. Divers explore and collect samples directly from the ocean floor. Underwater drones can go to places that are too deep or dangerous for humans to explore. And with sonar mapping, scientists use sound waves to create maps of the ocean floor. It's like using an echo to see what's underwater. The sound waves bounce off the seabed and come back, helping us create a picture of what it looks like. Deep underwater, archaeologists have found stone tools and other artifacts. They also discovered fossils of animals like Diprotodon and Thylacoleo. By studying the underwater terrain of Sahul, they learned about the ancient rivers, lakes, and coastlines that existed during the Ice Age. But Sahul isn't the only underwater continent. Sahul isn't the only hidden gem of Southeast Asia. Take Sundaland, a place made up of Sumatra, Java, Borneo, and some other islands. This place was crazy huge during the Ice Age, but now almost fully underwater. Almost, but not entirely. The parts above the ocean are teeming with life. If you like birds, check this place out. It has almost a fifth of the world's bird species. You can spot colorful birds like the Java hawk eagle and the Bali starling among the lush forests. It's also a home to a fourth of Earth's fish species. Sundaland's waters are a haven for marine life, even the most exotic animals like the Asian arowanas. It's also a treasure trove of flowers. That's where you can find Rafflesia and Titan arum, the world's largest flowers. This makes it very similar to Zealandia. Zealandia is a long, narrow piece of land about half the size of Australia. It broke from Antarctica about 100 million years ago. Just like Sundaland, it isn't fully underwater. 7% of it stayed above sea level. This sticking out little piece is what we now call New Zealand, along with Stewart Island and some smaller islands. These pieces of Zealandia are lush and warm. They're packed with volcanoes, mountain ranges, beautiful natural geysers, and hot springs. Local people, Maori, use these hot springs for cooking. People place corn, eggs, and vegetables in baskets and lower them directly in the hot springs. Sometimes they cook food in a pit oven using heated rocks. Another hidden world is known as Argoland. This mysterious landmass was once part of Australia, back when dinosaurs chilled around. It drove scientists crazy for decades. They knew it existed because it left a huge stretch on the ancient seafloor, the Argo Abyssal Plain. About 155 million years ago, it broke off from Australia, saying bye-bye. The continent drifted somewhere north, and when it reached Southeast Asia, it just vanished. Scientists had no idea where it went, but recently they finally found its remains. Turns out, poor Argoland's lower parts started drowning into the Sunda Trench, a horrifyingly deep oceanic pit. The Earth's crust sunk into the mantle. Meanwhile, the upper parts of Argoland were pushed upward, grabbing the younger rocks on land. Because of this, Argoland broke apart into a bunch of smaller pieces. These pieces formed parts of Borneo, Java, Sulawesi, and other regions. The remains are buried under Indonesia and Myanmar. Imagine a colossal landmass the size of Greenland, Greater Adria. Its journey began about 240 million years ago when it broke away from the supercontinent Gondwana. It started moving north, and after 100 million years of enjoying the warm seas, it suddenly crashed into Europe and shattered into pieces. Most of these pieces went deep into the Earth's mantle, but some were scraped off and became part of mountain ranges like the Alps. Today, the remnants of Greater Adria are scattered across more than 30 countries, from Spain to Iran. That's why they're hard to look for. Seychelles was also once part of Gondwana. Yep, these idyllic islands are sitting atop of the ancient continent. We know a lot about it because of its fascinating granite outcrops. 100 years ago, Alfred Wegener discovered continental drift, but no one believed him. These granite outcrops helped him prove that he's not crazy and that tectonic plates really are moving. The Seychelles broke off from India and Madagascar and eventually became a sad loner in the Indian Ocean. This probably happened because of some insanely active volcanoes in the Deccan Traps. But now, the islands are home to unique species, both on land and in the coral reefs nearby. Mauritius broke off from India after the dinosaur wiping. Along its journey, it stretched into a long ribbon-like shape and also broke into pieces. Now it's all scattered beneath the Indian Ocean. Scientists stumbled upon this lost land by studying tiny ancient crystals called zircons. These zircons are like time capsules. They date back an astonishing 660 million to 2 billion years. That's even older than Mauritius itself. These ancient crystals hinted that there's another Atlantis somewhere nearby. Turns out there are hidden continents all around the world, and maybe we'll discover more of them in the future. Tunnels, metro, underground systems, and even secret passageways to the houses of the rich and famous. Why else do we need tunnels, you may wonder? To hide. Many cities have underground tunnels and even underground doppelgangers. Now let's make it clear. Those passages are normally not connected, contrary to the popular rumor claiming that it was possible to get from Scotland to Turkey using underground passageways built around 5,000 years ago. I mean, it sounds insane even today. Imagine building it back in the day. These tunnels have an official name, the Erdstall Tunnels, and they were most likely built in the Middle Ages. However, we still don't have the exact information about the date. The highest concentration of those tunnels are in Bavaria, Germany, but there are many of them in Great Britain and France too. Erdstall tunnels, a unique type of earthen passage found globally, are characterized by their narrow, oval-shaped corridors and tight choke points, known as schlups, or slip-outs. Despite speculation, their purpose remains a mystery. However, some of those tunnels have fireplaces and even vents, which might mean those were used primarily for shelter. Dating back to the Middle Ages, possibly as early as the 12th century, Erdstall tunnels lack archaeological signs and historical records, so it's not a surprise that there are many rumors about their use. Some scientists are sure those were storage spaces, though their narrowness makes this impractical. Another idea is that they provided hiding spots for farmers during tribal raids. However, their single entry point raises doubts about their effectiveness in evading threats. Now, if you're feeling like Indiana Jones and want to venture into those tunnels, you're in luck. A few structures, like the Erdstall Radkobluken in Austria, welcome visitors to explore these enigmatic structures. Most of them are closed to the public eye, though. The origins of Erdstall tunnels remain largely unknown, just like their real functions. And if you think, hey, it's the 21st century here, we can study pretty much everything, well, you're wrong. What makes these tunnels hard to study are the tight confines. Traditional surveying methods often prove inadequate in such spaces. To solve this problem, scientists use a handheld device that integrates an RGB camera, a gyroscope, and high-resolution depth sensors, allowing them to capture intricate details of the tunnels. They also use modern techniques like 3D surveying in hopes of uncovering the true origins and purposes of those tunnels. One hypothesis even suggests they may have been poorly conceived dwellings, abandoned when their inadequacies became apparent. Still, not everyone quite agrees with this idea. Other theories suggest they served spiritual purposes, while the most intriguing idea speculates that those tunnels may be remnants of extraterrestrial civilizations. Experts believe they may have been used for practical matters, such as granaries or hiding spots from looters. As we don't have exact info on who built it and when, it may be pretty much anyone, even a sloth. Nope, I'm not a lunatic. Sloths can build giant tunnels. Check this out. In 2009, a farmer in southern Brazil was driving his tractor through a cornfield when it suddenly sank into the ground. He quickly discovered he had broken through the top of an underground tunnel. When researchers came to investigate, they found a tunnel around 6.5 feet high and the same 6.5 feet wide, extending about 50 feet long, right beneath the farmer's house. When they looked closer, they instantly saw deep claw marks on the walls. That was the proof the tunnel wasn't human-made. So that thing the farmer uncovered was a megafauna paleoburrow, a prehistoric tunnel dug by ancient creatures like giant ground sloths or giant armadillos from over 10,000 years ago. I know, it's hard to imagine those beasts, but let me help you. Take a hamster. Now, increase it to the size of an elephant. Don't forget, this 13-foot-tall hamster could also walk on two legs. During their time, around 15 million to 10,000 years ago, many species of sloths and giant armadillos roamed the Americas, some even digging similar tunnels. Today, many of these tunnels are filled with sediment, though some remain clear, similar to the one the farmer discovered. This 2009 find sparked significant interest, leading to the discovery of over 1,500 paleoburrows across southern Brazil, making it the era with the highest concentration of such sites worldwide. But no one knows exactly why there are so many of them in southern Brazil. While some paleoburrows exist throughout South America, none have been found in North America, which is weird since those huge sloths roamed the entire continent. The exact purpose of these large tunnels remains a mystery, but scientists believe they may have served as nursing spaces, temperature regulation, or hibernation areas. Tunnels likely developed over centuries as successive generations of sloths and armadillos expanded them. Now, let's take a look at fugus. No, not the Japanese fatal delicacy, and no, not a town in New Guinea. To see them, we gotta travel to the UK. So fugus are underground structures too, but they don't look exactly like tunnels. They are dry stone structures. They look as if a cave had been decorated with stones from the inside. There are only around 15 of them found so far, and most of them are located in Cornwall. According to the estimates, those tunnels were built about 2,400 years ago, and they're still in pristine condition, which is truly fascinating. I mean, back in the day, people had no cool machinery whatsoever, yet their structures still last. And if you dare to buy an apartment today, well, chances are you won't be too happy about the quality. Going back to our fugus, there's nothing extraordinary about their supposed purpose. They could be used for spiritual purposes, as a place to hide, or a food storage. The latest application, though, is a bit weird. I guess it's not a secret for anyone that England is famous for its excessive humidity, and if you want to store your food properly, you gotta avoid the humidity at all costs. Otherwise, say welcome to mold and fungi. But ancient people weren't dull-witted at all, or they wouldn't have survived, and you and I wouldn't be around now. So they might have adapted those fugus to store just some products, those that already had natural molds in them, assisting in the preservation of perishable food, like milk, butter, and cheese. But hey, those are just speculations. The true reason why they were built remains unknown. What makes fugus unique is that they are intentionally built tunnels, not just excavated mines like those in Wales. They were crafted by digging deep trenches, lining them with stone slabs, covering them with capstones, and then filling over them, all of which took significant time and effort. Still, no matter how hard those were to construct, cities around the globe are often built over intricate tunnel systems, each unique to its location. For instance, Paris is famous for its extensive underground quarries, which were abandoned years ago, but still pose a risk of collapse in certain areas above. London boasts one of the largest tunnel networks in the world, including many that were specifically created for military purposes. In New York City, there are rumors of secret tunnels, while Los Angeles has old tunnels from the Prohibition era used for speakeasies. Many other cities also have their share of enigmatic tunnels, and surprisingly, Florida is no exception. It happened in the year 2011 in Ybor City. Near a former post office, flooding uncovered something weird, a section of an unknown structure. Back then, people didn't pay much attention to that, so it took another 7 years to discover something truly fascinating. This historic neighborhood was founded in the 1880s, but it remained unknown until 2018 that it also has a hidden tunnel network. We only learned of it because of renovation work. The exact purpose, of course, is unknown, but most scientists are pretty sure that they serve to connect to early gaming spots and the port of Tampa. Figuring out how extensive the tunnel network is tricky. In 2018, a historic home in Seminole Heights revealed locked doors leading to tunnels from the 1920s. One local even said he traveled through a tunnel for 20 minutes. Rumors suggest some tunnels connect to the Hillsborough River and Ybor City. Research is ongoing, but no new info has emerged yet. How much time passed between the inventions of the first computer and the appearance of the modern one? The first electronic computer in history is the ENIAC, Electronic Numerical Integrator and Computer. It was invented in 1945 by American scientists. But there's an older machine. It's the Babbage Difference Engine. English engineer Charles Babbage built it in 1822. This means more than 200 years have passed since the first computer, and we would have thought so if, at the beginning of the 20th century, divers hadn't discovered a computer more than 2,000 years old. In 1900, a group of divers searched for sea sponges in the Mediterranean Sea between the island of Crete and mainland Greece. But instead of sponges, they found sunken treasure ships. It was one of the most significant archaeological finds of that time. At the bottom were Greek marble sculptures and many other artifacts. Among them, divers found a strange piece of stone the size of a large book. They ignored it and put it with other finds in the museum. A few months later, archaeologists began to study the block and discovered that a strange object with bronze gears was hidden inside it. This shocked all scientists because, according to historical data, such things could not exist in ancient Greece. The technologies of that time were not so developed. Scientists started studying this object and realized they had no idea what it was. They called it the Antikythera mechanism, and they had been trying to unravel its purpose for over 100 years. The fragility of the object added complexity. It had been underwater for a millennia. Its internal instruments were damaged, and when scientists touched them, they fell apart. Over many years of research, the object has split into 82 fragments, becoming a real puzzle for scientists worldwide. They found out that it was a machine designed for astronomical calculations. With the help of X-rays, computer tomography, and virtual modeling, people could partially recreate the image of the mechanism. It was a complex structure consisting of 30 rotating gears that turned the dial. The whole mechanism was set in motion with a hand crank. All this was necessary for the ancient Greeks to track the positions of the moon and the sun and calculate the time of eclipses and the Olympic Games. It's as if Silicon Valley was in ancient Greece and the best minds united to create a revolutionary startup. The Antikythera mechanism showed that people in the distant past had excellent knowledge of astronomy and technologies for studying the starry sky. Considering that time, it was not just a machine, but a supercomputer. People entered data into it and got the result after the complex calculations it performed. In 2016, scientists found an inscription on the device containing more than 3,000 symbols. It was something like a manual for use. The text had information about eclipse colors, celestial body movement, and astrological predictions. It was like a reference list of all the events that happened to the planets in the sky. The Greeks realized that all astronomical bodies in the starry sky moved along the same routes. That is, they had orbits close to the plane of motion of our planet around the sun. Ancient astronomers couldn't calculate the path of their movement, so they created the Antikythera mechanism. This was one of its main functions. The researchers found confirmation of this version in the words of the Roman lawyer Cicero. In one of his quotes, there was a mention of a computing machine created by mathematician Archimedes. According to Cicero, the machine could depict the movement of 5 stars called wanderers. At that time, people called celestial bodies that way. Archimedes had lived before the Antikythera mechanism was invented, but perhaps he created the drawings that became the basis of the device. The mechanism worked, and when you turned the handle on it, it rotated the gears in the front and rear parts of the device. And then, the dial showed you the direction of movement of space objects. Besides, the machine had an astronomical calendar inside and tracked the time of sporting events, such as the Olympic Games, and also helped to calculate the exact time of the eclipse. Apparently, the Antikythera mechanism was something like a powerful organizer used by scientists or wealthy citizens of Greece. But what is most unusual is that its creator probably installed the function that changed the observation properties depending on the observer's location. This means that ancient astronomers had to enter different coordinates in different areas for the correct result. NASA computers can do all these things today. These expensive multi-million-dollar devices work with electricity, chips, processors, and thousands of other things. And the ancient Greeks achieved the same result 2,000 years ago with the help of this small device. This changes the idea of the technologies of ancient Greece. People of that time had plumbing and used steam to control some equipment. They were developed, but no one expected them to go so far. Archaeologists were sure that people of ancient times used giant rough gears to operate windmills. And now, it turns out that they could create small and complex mechanisms that modern scientists couldn't figure out for 100 years. Divers continue to study the seabed where the Antikythera mechanism was found. They have already found other items, such as nails from the ship and a bronze ring. Such underwater excavations are dangerous and complicated, so the research takes a long time. Experts think that the Antikythera mechanism was not a single copy. Perhaps the ancient Greeks made the same or similar machines. Maybe they're hidden somewhere or were melted down to create something else. In those days, bronze was a costly metal, so when ancient astronomical computers broke down, people could melt them and sell the metal. Some researchers refer to the Antikythera mechanism as the ancient prototype of all modern devices. Phones, computers, and tablets have something in common with this machine. By the way, have you heard of the odometer device? This device tracks the distance traveled by car or other means of transport. Nowadays, odometers are digital, but this technology used to be mechanical, and the ancient Greeks were the first to invent it. According to some records, Archimedes might have created it. The Roman later adopted this device for use during long journeys to aid in road construction. The ancient Greeks were the first to attempt to understand the rules of geometry. The Babylonians and Egyptians used geometry in different spheres of life. However, the Greeks decided to use logical reasoning to establish the rules and formulas that we still use today. Archimedes observed that when a solid object was immersed in water, it displaced a mass of water equal to the volume of the object. Have you heard of the Hippocratic Oath? This document is read aloud by all doctors before they start practicing medicine. For us, concepts such as confidentiality between a doctor and a patient seem commonplace, as well as a doctor's duty to always try to cure and save people's lives. But all of this was invented by ancient Greek Hippocrates. In addition to the famous oath, he was one of the first to make a scientific leap in medicine. In ancient times, people viewed illnesses as punishment for bad deeds. But Hippocrates discovered that diseases were natural and that the human body could react differently to them. This may seem obvious now, but the ancient Greeks reached this conclusion in 460 BCE. Aristotle was the first to suggest that our planet is a sphere, and thanks to him, we enjoy movies, TV series, and performances. The ancient Greeks invented theater in the form we know it today. Aristotle wrote the first rules of drama in history, which guide directors and screenwriters on how to keep the viewer's attention. Greek writers created plays in various genres, including tragedies, satires, and comedies. All of this contributed to the formation of Western culture, and that's why many directors enjoy staging ancient plays. And this is only a small part of what the Greeks invented. Therefore, it's quite logical that they were able to create the Antikythera mechanism.
So, you've just finished your sightseeing tour of Edinburgh, Scotland, or Scotland. It lasted just under an hour, and you're hungry for more. You ask your guide if there's anything else to see, and they start talking about a mysterious underground city. You ask how long it takes to get there, and you're shocked by the guide's answer. You're standing on it. It's right under your feet. South Bridge? But you were just there and didn't notice a giant arrow pointing down. So this is where the mystery starts. The story begins in the mid-1700s. The Scottish capital wasn't as big as it is today. Only 60,000 people lived around Edinburgh Castle. All of them were packed inside medieval walls. And they say today's cities are overpopulated. Get a load of the living conditions back then. The buildings were tall, so there was little natural light. Some houses had 14 stories. Cows walked the narrow winding streets and left stuff. Things were so bad that the famous English writer Daniel Defoe noted, "I believe that in no city in the world so many people have so little room." Yep, that's the guy who wrote Robinson Crusoe. Well, something just had to be done. The solution was to build 2 long bridges to the north and to the south of the city. The names they gave the bridges were more descriptive than colorful. The bridge to the north was completed first. In 1785, construction on the second bridge got underway. It was going to connect the main pedestrian street in the north with the university buildings in the south of Edinburgh. But don't think of this construction as a modern bridge over a river. It was more of a viaduct, a type of bridge that connects 2 hills across a valley. The word viaduct comes from Latin, as Romans were pioneers in building these structures. Their capital was built on 7 hills. And just to be copycats, Edinburgh also straddled 7 major hills. Only 2 are visible today because the city has been built up. Now, back in the 18th century, the construction of the South Bridge was a remarkable feat of engineering. It took the builders only 3 years to complete it. 19 stone arches spanned a chasm that was 31 feet at its deepest point, and the length over 1,000 feet. Impressive, even for today's standards. But what does a 2.5 centuries old viaduct have to do with an underground city? Well, it is the city. You see, they designed Southbridge to be hollow on the inside. As you walk along this street today, there is actually a huge human-made cave beneath your feet. The popular name for this set of chambers is the Edinburgh Vaults. But what was the purpose of this space? And is there something or someone there now? Well, let's take it one step at a time. The builder's original intention was for these vaults to serve as merchant shops. At first, it worked out fine. Merchants used a total of 120 vaults as shops and warehouses. There were workshops, cobblers, and taverns. But as time went by, a major design flaw came to light. The stone was leaking, and the vaults were damp all the time. There was even flooding. The builders forgot to waterproof the structure. The merchants feared the water would damage their precious goods. After just a couple of years, the first tenants started moving out. Once legal trade moved away from the vaults, the city's poor moved in. And not only them, but all sorts of shady characters. Historians don't know much about this period, since there are no written records. But even the squatters had to leave soon. If you couldn't do business in these vaults, how could you live in them? It was damp and cold, and there was no ventilation, sanitation, or natural light. It really stunk. Every real estate agent's worst nightmare. Just 30 years after their completion, the Southbridge vaults were abandoned once and for all. But at a street level, business was as usual. The officials decided to fill the vaults with rubble for security purposes. Buried and forgotten, the memory of a once teeming merchant quarter of Edinburgh slowly faded from people's minds. Now, this is where the story gets a bit weird. During the 1980s, a Scottish rugby player accidentally found a tunnel leading into the vaults. The athlete didn't waste any time and started excavating the vaults with the help of his son. Several tons of rubble, and a decade later, the Southbridge vaults have been restored to their former glory, so to speak. They were again dark and damp as they were back in the 1700s. There were many interesting finds in this underground city. The vaults were littered with oyster shells, which were the standard diet for a working-class resident of Edinburgh at the time. Other finds, such as shoes and empty bottles, suggested that people actually lived in these claustrophobic vaults. Think of this the next time you see someone trying to rent their garage as an apartment. So, your guide was right. There really is a hidden city under the streets of Edinburgh. Well, at least one street. You have now gone down from the main pedestrian street into Cowgate. You look up and there it is, the only visible arch of the once impressive bridge. You are now searching online to book a tour of the vaults. You just have to see this place with your own eyes. But the Scottish capital isn't the only city with a mysterious underground. The historic region of Cappadocia in central Turkey hides no less than 36 cities beneath the ground. The biggest and the most impressive one wasn't discovered until 1963. It was built during the Byzantine era to protect the local population from invaders. We have similar structures made out of concrete in our cities, but the level of the Turkish underground city is really impressive. There are several levels, like in a multi-story car garage. The caves and tunnels lie 197 feet underground. That's 2/3 of the Statue of Liberty's height. The city could house 20,000 people at any given time, complete with livestock and food. The smell. Anyway, 20,000 is the average attendance at Major League Soccer matches today. You might want to add a field trip to one of these places the next time you go to Turkey. Most of these cities in Cappadocia can be found in rural areas. Makes sense, right? After all, they were dug out as hiding places. But in Europe, there is one city whose underground labyrinth resembles the vaults of Edinburgh. You've probably heard of Pilsen in the Czech Republic. But hold on a second, this isn't going to be a story of the most famous local product. Something brewed, perhaps? It's the story of a medieval city that survived underneath the streets of Pilsen. Water wells, cellars, and passageways stretch for more than 12 miles. Merchants and craftspeople used Pilsen's historical underground for storage. Water, food, ice, you name it. The waterworks are pretty impressive. Historians estimate that 360 wells are located under Pilsen's historical town center. In times of instability, the passageways served as safe havens for the locals. They definitely didn't go thirsty down there. Today, most tourists visit these mysterious underground cities. But in Canada, there's one where people live and work. The construction of Montreal's underground city began in 1962. The initial idea was to shelter traffic. That's a nice way to say that city officials were building a metro station. The idea caught on, and the project expanded. Now, it's a real-life urban maze hidden under the downtown area. Need a place to stay? There are hotels down there. Want to grab a bite? Step into one of the underground restaurants. Multiple shops, a library, cinemas, the list is long. There are even residential complexes. But how can people live under the ground? Simple. Although the city itself lies beneath the earth, the access points are at ground level. You can enter the 20-mile-long tunnel network at more than 120 places.